Board. Administrator Chansky, call the roll.
Ball. Present. Jensen.
Present.
Maroney.
Present.
Scott.
Here.
And Zierden.
Present. All right, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
all.
All right, can I get an approval or amendment of the agenda?
I'll approve the agenda as written.
Second.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind a point of clarification on the agenda. Seems like it's being moved forward as though it was provided to us, and yet I understand that there's a change to what was identified as the closed session, no longer being a closed session. So if we move forward with the agenda as is presented, are we not in alignment with what the city attorney is guiding us as a council to do?
Our city attorney has let us know that there are no grounds for a closed session. He did outline that in the email that he sent earlier today.
Correct. So where on the agenda then are we going to be addressing the separation agreement with the administrator?
In the open session, so we will be approving or not accepting the resignation. It won't be closed, it'll be open.
Right, but where is it on the agenda specifically?
Number 5,
Which is identified as a closed session pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05, which we are not having.
that is the old agenda.
Which is probably why people have gone to the back to get a more recent agenda. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll go ahead and move on to 5. Joe? Okay.
Mayor, Council, Joe Lango, City Attorney. So you have before you, you were provided earlier this afternoon, the resignation of City Administrator David Chansky. Along with that resignation was a statement concerning a response to a report, investigation report, and as part of that statement, not only was there a resignation, but also the assertion that certain portions of his employment agreement have come into play, specifically the portion on the 3rd page that refers to resigning due to unsafe, unhealthy, or hostile work environment. And pursuant to that language, the employee may, at his option, be deemed to be terminated on the effective date of the resignation, which he stated in his correspondence to be September 7th. And the employee shall be entitled to receive the termination benefits set forth above. And then as part of that, he provided to the city a proposed separation agreement. The agreement is not necessary or required under his employment agreement, but it does, by entering into a separation agreement, the dollar value of those termination benefits are set forth, and also part of that separation agreement is an agreement by Mr. Chansky to waive all claims against the city of Breezy Point. So that is what is for consideration tonight. The steps would be to first accept his resignation, and then to discuss and make a motion one way or another on a separation agreement, And if we need to talk about that some more, I'm certainly happy to do that.
Thank you. Anyway,
Well, I'm certainly interested in understanding, Joe, from your point of view, anyone can assert most anything they want to when it comes to an unsafe or hostile environment. What do we specifically know to have taken place or otherwise exists that would get us concerned that he's essentially submitting his resignation in light of a less than favorable work environment being maintained? What do we specifically know? What can we understand to have happened to where the administrator would feel as though he's been subject to a hostile work environment?
Mayor and council, the document that he provided with response, specifically the response to the investigation report, refers to, and I'm looking at the conclusion here, and I can't give you more detail than what I have in front of me or what you were provided, is that the city has shown clear and specific evidence of an unhealthy, unsafe, and hostile work environment. I've endured this treatment for the better part of 18 months now, and many additional incidents, both on behalf of myself and other members of the city staff, have been brought forward to members of the city council. So my understanding from the document provided by Mr. Chansky is that underlying that assertion is not only how staff handled or responded to the most recent incident, but also other incidences that have gone on or occurred over the past year and a half. The details of those I don't have because I wasn't involved in those incidents. So,
Well, I'm asking just as one of 5 elected officials, if we're being asked tonight to approve the administrator's resignation, then to me, the administrator's resignation stands on itself. He is resigning. We are not terminating him. We are not in agreement that a hostile work environment, in fact, exists. And I will certainly not be in favor of spending over $100,000 of taxpayer money in approving a separation agreement when I have heard, we have known of nothing that would even come close in my mind to a hostile work environment existing. So I don't know and understand what the risk is to the city.
well, the risk of the city is, so you have an employment agreement with your city administrator, right? And that employment agreement states in it those terms, that if at any time the employee resigns due to an unsafe, unhealthy, or hostile work environment, he is deemed to be terminated at his option, not the council's option, on the effective date of his resignation, and shall also be entitled to receive the termination benefits set forth above. So that's the agreement that the city agreed to with him. If you pass a vote and accept his resignation, but dispute the validity of his statements and his, response to the report, then, the downside of that is a potential litigation over an employment contract, right? Because you're disputing the terms of the contract, and you're losing what he's offering, which is a waiver of all claims against the city.
and I would add to what he's also offering is a smoother transition, which we absolutely need, especially given that we have a budget to approve. And so I am in favor of moving forward.
I would just note too that like if the city were to terminate the administrator, we would be paying the same amount of money to him based on the agreement. So,
But we are clearly not terminating the administrator. The administrator has made a conscious decision to resign under the belief that there is an unhealthy, unsafe, hostile work environment. And yet as a council, we are provided absolutely no information that substantiates that to be true. And I don't know, I certainly can't sit here tonight and knowingly spend over $100,000 in separation benefits and in no way understanding what did we as the city, as the employer, do wrong. That's the piece that I don't see. I don't know what the concern is. If he wants to resign, if he's separating his employment, then to me, it's a simple separation of employment.
And I would argue that past city administrators have received the same courtesy within their separation agreements. So I do feel that to make it smooth for the city and to allow us to move forward in the best way forward, this is it. He has served our city well, and I think that by not accepting it, I think that we are going to put ourselves at risk for going to court, and we are going to put our risks at not having a smooth transition, which I would really appreciate, given that we have some important things that are coming up.
We are responsible as a council to make sound financial decisions on behalf of the taxpayers that we are accountable to. And I simply don't understand how any decision tonight can be made to separate the administrator and pay out over $100,000 when all we have is mere allegations at best that he's been subject to a hostile work environment.
I think
Now, it would
There
be
has been
different if we had
plenty.
examples, if we had concrete situations, if we knowingly understood there to be a less than favorable environment to work in that exists. I have no understanding or information otherwise that that was the case. And I think it's wholly irresponsible for anyone on this council to vote in favor of a separation agreement and a payout of that kind of money to an employee who is simply resigning.
I would like to get everyone else's thoughts on council.
Rebecca, can you explain, I mean, he will get paid the same either way?
I mean, the only way he wouldn't is if he resigned.
Yes.
Just with 30 days' notice.
Okay.
Correct. But if we disagreed with, I guess, his position and just went ahead and terminated him, we're paying him the same amount. So I'm just trying to think of like what the alternative would be. At this point, I guess.
And as
Wasn't the
far as
alternative for us to
transition-
accept his resignation and?
I would really
for-
like to hear from the other council members, please. Thank you.
Go ahead, let Brad speak. Okay, the smooth transition, what are you referring to?
We would need to find an interim administrator. David has names for us that we can call and contact. He's going to be available to us. And we have a lot of things that we've started, a lot of projects that we need to move
Well,
forward on.
understood, it's budget.
The last thing I want is for him to just leave and he has the right to do that. And so if we're accepting his resignation without these terms, then I think on the back end, we are gonna regret that with everything that we have going on and the budget that we have to approve by law in a matter of weeks.
And yet you can call the League of Minnesota Cities and find all kinds of resources for interim leadership at the city level. So I don't know that, no disrespect to David. I mean, I think David has served our city very well. It's more to do with the decision that's in front of us tonight and whether there's a sound financial basis with which to pay separation benefits to an employee who, as far as I understand and know, is resigning. I don't know of too many places when you resign, just simply say, oh, and by the way, here's 6 months worth of pay and insurance benefits and so forth that amounts to over $100,000 as you leave. That usually just doesn't happen.
I definitely remember discussing that when we hired Administrator Chansky, just because of the length of time it takes to find another comparable position. So we specifically negotiated putting in that 6-month salary into the agreement.
Thank you. Councilman Maroney?
I had more questions than answers when reviewing the packet and information with that. And it kind of goes back to the language that's written in the contract, the employment contract. And what Mr. Scott is kind of attuning to is we have the response to the report. Is that enough data to go off of? I know, Mr. Lingle, you said you didn't have enough or everything. Is that enough to compile the hostile work environment?
So that's ultimately up to you to decide, right? He's resigned pursuant to that provision in his agreement. He didn't resign pursuant to the next paragraph, which says that if an employee voluntarily resigns, he agrees to give 30 days notice and there's no termination pay. That's not what he's doing. He's resigning into the hostile work environment piece of it. So, I mean, you'd have to ask him if he's willing to resign under the other piece. Otherwise, what I see here is that there's a contract dispute brewing as to whether that provision applies. And, I mean, you have the right to have that dispute if you want, if you want more information or if you want some sort of back and forth on that. If my point at the beginning of this was, in terms of pros and cons, he's providing an out for the city in terms of avoiding liability for breach of contract, right? And in the process of doing that, he's offering to waive all claims against the city. So it's approved, both sides go their separate ways, you're done. I have not spoken to Mr. Chansky about this at all. I don't represent him, I represent the city. So, you know, how you want to proceed going forward is entirely up to you. If you want to accept a resignation in the manner in which he's offered it and then approve the agreement, then we're done. If that's not the will of the council, then there's going to be further discussion on all this that may or may not lead to a contested issue.
Okay. My next question is, I believe reading the separation agreement, it normally says that the person separating has 21 days to sign.
That's a legal requirement.
How much time does the council have to sign?
The statute doesn't, it's a pro-employee provision that is in the statute that allows them time to reconsider the agreement. It has to be in there if you're going to waive those claims.
So then my follow-up question, because this was brought up today by email, is if we can have more time to consider this, and while I'd like to act on it more swiftly than not wait until the next month, is call for a special meeting just to address the separation agreement. And if possible, just throwing this out there, is compile a two-person committee to dig deeper into this with Joe and figure out our options.
I feel that the investigation report has already done that, and that was provided to us, and that was done by Joe's office. So I don't think that necessarily digging into it more is actually going to help. I really think that just like moving forward with it, the language is gray, right? It doesn't say hostile work environment at the council's approval. It just states that. So we are talking about something that is gray, and it really has to be whether or not each of us believes that moving forward, accepting it as is going to be best for the city and not drag it out. I'm not sure that putting two people on a committee to investigate this further is a good use of time, especially again with the budget and everything else coming. I would rather just work with Administrator Chansky on really moving the city forward, finding an interim and really saying, okay, how do we keep things flowing? Otherwise, this might really hurt the city if we continue to try to dig into it further, when I think we already have heard that the language is not necessarily black and white, but it can be argued.
Mr. Engel, did you review that agreement when the council, approved it, the separation agreement, was that ever presented to you for
The
review?
separation agreement or his employment agreement?
The separation, being able to get,
Employment agreement.
for employment then, yeah.
No.
So-
I was not asked to review that.
Okay, so council then just approved it.
I believe it was presented to us from our consultant, David Drown and Associates. I believe that was who we used.
Where do you stand, Councilman Ball?
I mean, it certainly doesn't say that we have to determine that he is in an unsafe, unhealthy, or hostile work environment. It could be that it is his viewpoint that he is in an unsafe, hostile, or unhealthy work environment. I don't know that it's my place to make that determination for him, or that no matter how much information we received, I would ever be able to know how he's feeling personally. I really think the only alternative for the city would be to terminate him, and I would hate to do that based on the fact that everyone up here is saying he's done a great job for the city up until this point. So in my mind, I'd be willing to accept his resignation based on the terms that he has given us.
Alderman Jensen?
I guess I'm unsure at this point. I mean, it's a gray area. I'm not a lawyer. The verbiage is vague. Michael, this group that presented it or wrote this employment agreement, are they HR consulting or what? Who is?
David, Mr. Chansky, was it David Drown that was assisted? Thank you. So David Drown assisted us in the headhunting, if you would, of administrators. And so when it came time to procure an agreement, this was what was presented. The verbiage was, memory serves me correctly, there.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Joe, would it be your interpretation that under provision 15, termination benefits, the first paragraph really gets to if the council, as the employer, is terminated the employee, right? So we're taking affirmative action to separate Dave as the administrator. Then it gets into, the payment of 6 months of aggregated salary, so forth and so on. And then as you get into the next paragraph, it gets more into, if the employee is sort of initiating separation, if the employee is looking to resign for reasons that they believe is, being subject to discrimination or, hostile work environment and so forth. I mean, am I kind of looking at those two paragraphs right? I mean, one kind of gets into action being taken by the employer and benefits that are owed to the employee differently than in the next paragraph. If the employee is initiating it, then I almost kind of get the impression like the employee is just simply resigning by way of initiating the separation with the city.
Well, they are certainly aimed at different scenarios. So the first one states that in the event the employee is terminated by the city during such time that the employee is willing and able to perform the duties of the city, then he gets all these benefits. So yes, you're correct. It is the city taking affirmative action to terminate when the employee is willing and able to perform. The second paragraph is really, it's a combination of things, right? It starts out with things that the employer did or didn't do, reduces his salary, alters a job description, refuses to comply with other provisions of the agreement. Employee resigns following a formal suggestion by the employer that he resign. But then that next phrase, is what's at issue here, is or resigns due to an unsafe, unhealthy, or hostile work environment. As Councilmember Ball indicated, that doesn't require, by that language, some sort of affirmative decision or position by the city council as to whether that happened. It's in here that he resigned due to an unsafe, unhealthy, or hostile work environment. It's a little vague, but the fact remains that the city agreed to this language, and he has asserted in his response that that is what occurred here and has been occurring for the last 18 months. It doesn't require any kind of finding by the city council that that is in fact the case. On the other hand, that doesn't mean that you cannot, contest that conclusion that he's made, or, So it leaves us where we were before, frankly. He's made an assertion under his agreement that this is what's occurring. He has the right to make that assertion. It is not a purely typical resignation with 30 days' notice. And if the council disputes that this is in fact what happens, well, then we're into a contract dispute.
I think what Mr. Scott might be getting to, that I think if you would have read a little bit further, the last 3 lines, that if he resigns due to unsafe, unhealthy, or hostile, skip a few, then employee may, at his option, be deemed terminated on the effective date of the employee's resignation, and the employee shall also be entitled to receive the termination benefits set forth above.
Right, so by being deemed terminated, that's what triggers the benefits. That's what goes back to that paragraph above.
As essentially determined by the administrator.
By
Under
the
the
employee,
idea
yes.
or this notion that there's an unsafe and hostile environment that exists.
Correct.
Councilman Ball, would you like to make a motion? Are you ready to make a motion? I know that you also have to get to 4 other closed session meetings tonight still.
Yes, I'm supposed to.
I mean, I
have
think,
time?
it would be nice to know I know Steve Jensen, you kind of indicated your thoughts, and Maroney said you have a lot of questions, so I don't know that I'm ready to make a motion, I guess.
Whether we like it or not, the language exists in the contract. And if you read it as we are, there is some gray area about who deems the unsafe. At this point, though, the statement of if they resign due to unsafe, unhealthy, or hostile work environment, which we've all read the report, which I believe does justify underneath that clause, continuing on is that he deems to be terminated, therefore the termination benefits of clause 15 do take an effect.
You might draw from the report that the net conclusion of that was there was such a hostile and unsafe environment that was maintained at City Hall that he effectively deems himself terminated. Do I understand that? I believe you and I got the same report and probably looked over the same information. And I in no way could have ever have drawn that conclusion.
Just for clarity, if he deems it that there was an unsafe, unhealthy, or hostile work environment, it's not that he feels he was terminated. He makes, at his option, he can state, I therefore deem that I have been terminated. There's a difference there. He has the option, under the agreement that you guys agreed to, he has the option to state that, given this environment, I'm going to deem myself terminated, and I get these benefits. That's the way that, this is unusual language, but there it is. And it's not that he feels terminated, it's just that he has the option of stating, I am terminated.
To receive the benefits,
Yes.
which I think could hold up in court, which then would cost us time and money down the road instead of just moving forward. I think there's a lot to learn in the situation. Also, HR, right? I think there's a lot to
Well,
learn.
that's why I asked, the question, if Mr. Engel, as the city's attorney, reviewed the agreement, okay, it was the headhunter that wrote it. You know, I think that was a mistake by not having our city attorney review it. This agreement was signed, what, 2021
22.
or 22?
I think we could have another, I get our next session, if we have a special session or workshop, we can then discuss how to move forward. So to prevent these things from happening in the future, I mean, I think that with our city growing, I think we're gonna run into some of these things, and I just think that we have to address them. But I don't know that it's ever been in the best interest of a city to get into litigation. We've seen that. And so I really do believe that the language is not clear, but it does hold up based on the report that David did send us. And it's not our position to, like Councilwoman Ball said, to say, well, how you feel is wrong. So I worry about the litigation side of it for the city. We have other things that we need to be moving forward on.
And I don't want it to be misunderstood. I am in no way saying what the administrator is saying is wrong or inappropriate in his mind. What I'm saying as an elected official responsible to spending taxpayer dollars in sound, practical ways, there is no way that I can, in good conscience, vote for a separation that pays over $100,000 in benefits when, again, anyone can say whatever they want. That they've been discriminated against or they're being harassed and therefore they consider themselves terminated or soon to be terminated. It doesn't mean that that's the case. And because we don't have information, because there isn't any more of an environment established where we know good and well without question that there was hostility, there was all kinds of things taking place, is every bit of the reason why I cannot vote for it.
And I would tend to agree with you, but I think there where that gray line is, it's due to what their vision of the situation is. And if he's claiming that right now, there's no language that is put in there that we have to justify what that is. Right or wrong, that's the way we're with right now.
Oh, it's every bit of wrong, Mike. I mean, the council at the time that approved this agreement should have had, I agree with Steve, the city attorney at the very least review and help guide the council to have open-ended provision in a employment contract that allows someone to define the terms of their separation. I have never seen before, honestly, in my 35 years of public management. I've never seen it.
And I would agree with you that it is wrong where it is, but right or wrong, this is the language we have in front of us today.
Well, and I just want to, again, restate that I feel as though it's very wrong. I mean, the council at the time, in looking out for taxpayers' interest and how money is spent, should have never have had a provision in an agreement that left it so open-ended, we are on the hook for over $100,000.
I agree.
End of the day, bottom line, that's my take and view on it. We can agree to disagree. I'm completely fine with that.
No, I definitely agree that should have went in front of, I think we thought at the time that it was something approved, but
Hindsight's 2020. There's lots of things that you can look back on and wish you would have done, and all we can do now is move forward and
Yeah, like
right.
not have abolished the Finance and Personnel Committee. I don't want to be that person that said, I told you so. But I raised my concerns at the time, Mayor, when you and the majority of the council moved to eliminate the Personnel Committee. These are the exact situations and very reason why we need to, as an employer, have a committee that nonetheless allows employees an outlet to bring concerns and matters to. We don't have that.
they have to be able to trust the council members that are on those committees too. But Scott, Councilman Jensen and I, we've discussed outside HR consultant, which is a neutral party, which I think is actually better for our employees moving forward, to have someone who isn't entangled in the community, who has quarrels with other people, who maybe doesn't get along with certain people. So I believe that moving forward, instead of a committee, I believe that we should look at hire an HR consultant from the outside that is unbiased.
That is still not the employer.
Yeah.
I mean, I think hindsight being 2020, I agree with Brad, it was a mistake. But at the time, the Personnel Committee hadn't met in over a year. And people voiced their opinions, you know, that had been on the committee. I don't want to be involved in hiring. You know, that should be up, if we have an administrator, you know, department heads, chief of police, they should be able to hire whom they deem,
How
you
are you
know,
on time?
fit, so.
Are you okay?
I'm fine for another 5 minutes or so. I'll just be late. Just want to make sure I answer all your questions, so.
Now it comes down to is vague language and fear of litigation. You know, I think Brad brings some good points, you know, why it wasn't done with the previous council, to have the attorney review it. It doesn't matter. I mean, we don't know that answer, and at this point, it really doesn't matter. We're faced with what we have in front of us now.
Okay, well, it sounds like some of us are in agreement that what's done is done, and
I'll make a motion to approve the resignation of David Chansky along with the separation agreement.
A second.
all right, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Carries. All right, thank you for taking the
Thank
time.
you.
All right, so we'll go ahead and move on to open forum. If anyone wants to come up, name, address. Yes.
State my name and stuff.
Yeah, name and address, please.
Brent Bushman, and I live in Ottawa Trail. I just want to go over something or address something that, something I used to think was a nuisance, but I actually believe it's a huge concern right now. On August 20th, my 22-year-old daughter was violently bit by a cat in our driveway. Long story short, police were called, animal control was called. Could not find the owner, could not find the cat. And because we had no cat in quarantine, my daughter had to get rabies shots. We all know those are probably not real fun. This being said, I think the council needs to address this situation in means of a cat ordinance, I guess, just like a dog ordinance. I mean, there's no real reason cat owners shouldn't be held responsible just like dog owners. So I just wanted to mention that, and thank you for your time.
All right, thank you so much.
Mr. Bushman, I have a question. In the email that you sent to council, you had stated that in your area, there's been a feral cat problem
Yes.
for quite some time.
Yes.
So you see numerous cats
That
throughout
evening,
the
there
area?
was 2 other cats with that cat.
Okay. Because I know in the past, the city has had issues with feral cats years ago as well in different part of the city.
Yes,
but-
my parents live on Bushman Road, and they have cat problems there too.
Yeah, and this wasn't even Bushman, but I know this has been an issue before. And I think an individual worked with Babinski, because I know they do not deal with feral cats. But thank you for coming forward and letting
Thank
us
you for your
know.
time.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening, Travis Moser, Cedar Street. Just a follow-up to that, there was a house that was, if you turn off of County Road 39 onto Ottawa Trail, there was a house approximately a half a mile down. We used to walk by, I don't know if it was abandoned or what, but there was 20 cats in there, and I actually have a picture of one on my driveway the other morning. I live on the other side of Ottawa on Cedar Street. So there's definitely some feral cats from that area. I don't know where they are now, but they're still there. There's a good number of them. I'll catch them in my driveway. I caught one inadvertently under my garage door and pinned it a couple months ago. So I don't know if they're still in that same area, but it's on the south side of Ottawa Trail, approximately a half mile from County Road 39. So I don't know if that helps the police at all or whoever can do anything about it, but they're definitely there. And this cat was this big in my driveway 5 days ago. So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Chief Sandell, do you know where that house is? Is it abandoned?
And it's, at one point it was torn down, there was a camper there, it looked like they were maybe gonna rebuild, and then I think that just stopped. So it now is just a vacant lot. It used to be a house with a garage that was completely boarded up, just looked very run down, grown over, but there was easily 15, 20 cats in there.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah,
If it's the house I'm thinking of,
Okay.
it's been removed, yeah.
yeah.
All right,
But
thank
I'm
you.
sure that's where they're from.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else?
Hi, Denise Simpson, Robin Hood Lane. I'm not really sure if this is an appropriate time, but I actually came to see if you were going to be talking about the budget, so I could actually ask to be the agent for the city of Breezy Point. I am 24 years experience of insurance agency, and I live in Breezy Point. So I had presented a letter, but I'm not sure if you had received it or not. I was just wondering if I could ask when would be an appropriate time then to come and talk to you about being the agent for the city. Is there an appropriate time?
That was,
Whenever you want.
okay. Can we follow up with you after?
Sounds great. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Tom Lillahei, 7460 Fairway Lane. I just wanted to make a few comments. I know on your agenda tonight, you are going to be talking about bonding. And my personal feeling is you want to minimize the number of bondings that you do, okay? Bonding costs money. It's going to cost money to initiate the bonding. So if you have the cash, pay cash for something. On City Hall, if you can pay the cash for it, don't bond, because bonding just wastes taxpayer money. You're going to pay a lot more in interest, you're going to pay a lot more in origination fee. So if you're going to minimize those origination fees, minimize the interest that you pay, it's going to save this money to the city over the long run. Do whatever you can. When I was mayor, that was the first thing we did, was to try and eliminate all the bonding, and we finally did, and which is why we're debt-free, okay? Now we're talking about, bonding for Bushman. That's a huge expense, okay? We need to have a policy of pay-as-you-go, and that's what I had when I was mayor, is pay-as-you-go without having to do any bonding and pay that extra interest to the banks. We don't need to be doing that with taxpayer money. So minimize bonding. Do that at all possible. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we will go ahead and move on to preliminary budget. Mr. Chansky?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So tonight, we're here to discuss your preliminary 2025 budget and levy. As required by state statute, you are required to adopt a preliminary levy and send it to the county auditor by September 30th of each year. So that's what we're here to do, is to discuss the preliminary 2025 budget and levy. And then once you have discussed it, is to consider adopting it ahead of that deadline. What this meeting is not, as we've discussed in previous times, is not to discuss property valuation. That is something that is done by the Crow Wing County beginning of earlier in the first third of the year, normally in the spring, April, May timeframe. And if people have questions about their valuations, they should talk to the Crow Wing County Land Services Department down in Brainerd. They can be reached at 218-824-1010. So a little background we'd like to go through before we get into the nitty-gritty, just some education of what is a levy. A tax levy is the amount of money or revenue a government entity must collect through property taxes to ensure a balanced budget. It's calculated by subtracting anticipated non-tax revenues from anticipated expenditures. So we take, again, what are expenditures, what are non-tax revenues, and whatever is left over that's what we need to levy. So again, expenditures minus non-tax revenue gets to your levy amount. The city has 4 levies that combine make up the total tax levy. That's your general fund, your EDA fund, your cemetery fund, and your debt fund. We have some other funds that we'll talk about near the end, but they are non-levying funds. So how do we determine personal property taxes? So I'll go simplified first. First, you take the city's estimated market value, which is determined by the Crow Wing County Assessor's Office. That applies to a statutory formula that's applied by the Assessor's Office. And then that comes up what they call a tax capacity of the city. You then take that levy that we talked about, the money you need to tax to meet your budget, divide that by the tax capacity, and that's how you get a tax rate. The tax rate is then applied to personal properties. So levies are set in dollars, not percentages. So we're going to say this is the amount of dollars the city needs to levy to have a balanced budget. Property value determines your proportion of the dollars that go into the jurisdiction. So when you look at pie, I like to use that image, a pizza or a regular pie. The pie is the levy. So how big the pie gets depends on the levy. And then your property value determines how big your slice of the pie is. So again, how we determine individual taxes, we take an individual property's tax capacity, multiply it by the tax rate, and then you get your taxes for your city. The other thing we want to mention here is we are talking about the city's levy. We're not talking here about Crow Wing County's, Region 5 Development Commission's levy, or the school district's levy. We're talking purely just the city of Breezy Point here. So if we're going to go into some detail, the preliminary estimated market value for the city is $927,119,600. That becomes a preliminary estimated tax capacity of $9,645,499. The preliminary levy presented tonight for 2025 is $3,385,608. So when you divide that number by the tax capacity, you get a preliminary tax rate of 35.100%. This estimated market value is an increase of $55,904,600 from 2023. The tax capacity is an increase of $652,065 from 2023. The preliminary levy that we'll go through in detail here shortly is an increase from 2024 of $172,090, or roughly 5.4%. And the preliminary tax rate of 35.1% is 0.632% lower than 2024. So use an example of what this would look like for an individual's property taxes. If an individual had a property that had a taxable market value of $350,000, that would turn into, and we're assuming here also a single-family homesteaded residential property here. A tax capacity of $3,500, multiply that by the 35.100%, that would come to an individual city property taxes of $1,228.51. Now again, when you receive in a couple months, when individuals receive their preliminary tax statement, normally in end of October, beginning of November, that will not, if you look at the bottom number, that's your aggregate taxes. So again, we're talking about just the city here. Again, the tax rate is 0.632% lower than last year. And so for example, in this example, a property that if its value did not change year over year, they would actually see a $22.10 decrease in 2025 because the tax rate went down. Now we'll get into discussion. If the value of your house went up faster than the rate went down, then you might not see your taxes go down. But if your property value stayed the same or even went down, you'll likely see a decrease in your property taxes. In my memo attached, we've got some a tax implementation for some properties I did, and we'll have that at the end. So, breaking down the preliminary budget as we have it now, that is in the packet. 46% of the budget is public safety, 21% public works, 12% is towards administration, and 7% towards land use, planning and zoning, building, 2% for parks, and then 12% is other governmental. So it's things like insurances and other services. Some of the things that were considered and discussed during the council's budget workshop on August 19th is the implementation of the equipment capital improvement plan, the city hall project, road improvements, annual wages and insurance increases, training and education, and greater emphasis on training and education across the board for staff, and then just general cost increases. So let's go over some of the non-tax revenue. Again, more detail is in my memo. In the packet is much more detail than I'm going to go here in this presentation. So if people have questions, it's all in there. So some of the larger non-tax revenues that the city sees is the Smallest Cities Assistance Program for local transportation. This is through MnDOT. This is actually the number that was presented in our workshop. We had originally in the budget was about $65,000. When I was doing a little more research and double checking all of our numbers after the workshop, realized that that number that had actually been sent out by the league previously was the 2024 number, and the 2025 number provided by MnDOT was actually about $30,000 higher, or more. So I think in the budget we had about $65,000. MnDOT's estimate for 2025 is actually about just over $90,000. So that we adjusted that in the budget, and that's one of the main reasons why the levy that actually you saw we're going to talk about tonight versus what we talked about on the 19th is actually lower tonight than it was on the 19th by about 1.2%. So about $90,000 from the state from there. Police PERA aid, that's something the city gets every single year. The state increases it a little bit every single year. In October is when they normally come out with the new numbers. This is, again, is just an aid to cities to help cover retirement benefits for police and fire. Pequot Lakes Fire District, we do get some revenue from that as we act as the fiscal agent for the district. We have a contract with the Pelican Township to provide 20 hours of policing each week, 20 hours of policing each week. And then we do have a transfer in from the capital fund for streets or road improvements that we'll discuss when we get down to Public Works. So that's some of the major sources of revenue. Obviously, we have building permits, multiple different types of permits, from your golf cart permits. All of that goes into this. Again, in the budget document that's provided, as well as more detail in the memo. So jumping into expenditure summary, for administration, city council, and the city attorney, there's not that much change year over year. Again, I'm not going to go into, we already talked about annual wage increases and benefit increases, so that's across the board, and training, so that's across the board on all departments. So things specific to this, with the assistant city administrator position becoming vacant here at the end of the week, we had a discussion at the workshop about what's the best way to fill that position. So the council will continue to talk about how you wish to fill that position, and that may change if you want to keep it as assistant city administrator or something else. And then depending on how you choose to go with that position, obviously those costs may go down as well. City attorney, we did add $10,000 to that budget based off of just some ongoing litigation and actual year-over-year costs for the city attorney. For police and fire, the main increases for police was from the professional services side, and that came from a new records management system, or RMS, with Crow Wing County that Crow Wing County is implementing, that they do then charge out to all the local police departments. It is a cost that we do need to pay so that we can be working with Crow Wing County, with the Sheriff's Office, with dispatch, so that the county attorney can continue to be our prosecutor. It allows our records to smoothly go in and be able to share records back and forth. They are implementing a new system, and right now, as Chief Sandell presented on August 19th, It's a estimated cost increase to the city of just about a little over $35,000. We are looking into some grant opportunities, but right now that's what's the primary increase towards the police department. On the fire district side, this is another
David,
area.
Before you move on, just a quick question on that. Is that a one-time increase, or is that anticipated to be an annual
Chief Sendoff.
increase, or?
It's going to be a slight increase for the first 5 years, and after 5 years, it's going to continue to increase. They did not give us any figures on what those numbers would be 5 years out, but it's small increases from year to year, and what we've budgeted would cover those increases through the 5 years. So I want to say it was 30,000 we put in to cover the records management system, and that will carry us through that 5 years.
Okay, thanks.
Pequot Lakes Fire District, so at the time we had met on August 19th, I hadn't received their 2025 budget yet. So I had put in a number, a conservative number, that I didn't believe they would exceed. After that, I did get their number, and our annual contribution actually is being reduced by $5,000. Again, with that, the way that the formula works, primarily based off of property values. So essentially what must have happened is Pequot's property values increased at a greater rate than Breezy's did. So our contribution for 2025 is actually going down by $5,000. Pequot's is going up by 11. So that's where another area where actually was able to reduce that preliminary by another 20. So we were able to reduce expenditures by 29,000. We added roughly 30,000 in revenue, and that's what was able to reduce that preliminary levy by that additional 1.2% from what we discussed on the 19th. Public Works and Parks, you'll see it looks like Public Works on a lot of their wages and benefits went down, but Parks went up. What we did is, again, we reallocated some of the wages between Parks and Public Works based off of the actual time that we were seeing the Public Works crew actually spending on parks. So you kind of move it from one place to another. But we wanted to try to be accurate to where the time and money was actually being spent. Equipment repairs and maintenance, we did increase that budget a little bit just based off of some maintenance and repairs we were seeing. A lot of these maintenance and repairs are not something you can predict, but we wanted to make sure that we were accurately budgeting for maintenance and repairs. And then the big thing was road improvements. So at your workshop on August 19th, you had a discussion led by Public Works Supervisor Zierden regarding road improvements for 2025. You'll remember we kept the road maintenance budget, so dust coating and things like that, the same from last year. We felt that was still a good amount of money. But Public Works Supervisor Zierden talked about, even with the city working on the street CIP, it'd be great if you there are some low-hanging fruit that the city could start addressing when it comes to road improvements. And it'd be great to have some funding for the Ad Hoc Streets Committee to work with and make recommendations to the City Council. So at the workshop, the City Council designated $150,000 of existing levy dollars toward road improvements, and then supplemented that with $150,000 for capital, for a total of $300,000 for road improvements. Again, the Ad Hoc Streets Committee will be involved in helping the council, advising the council on what improvements should be done in 2025. Planning, zoning, and building side, there was a $10,000 reduction in that we were eliminated a seasonal temporary employee we had left in there for last year during the transition when Mr. Ganson was coming on board. That's no longer needed, so we removed that. And then inspection services had a slight increase, but that's also because we increased the building permit revenue based off of what we were seeing year over year and looking at into 2025. And the inspection services are based off of building permit revenue. So we only pay Mr. Sadusky and Mr. Hanson, our building inspectors, based off of actual building permits. So if we get no building permits, they don't get paid because they didn't do any work. So when you increase the revenue, you have to increase the expenditure as well. On another side, on the other government, the council previously just discussed tonight, human resources. That was a discussion on August 19th about looking at getting some outside assistance on human resources. And so you designated the professional services budget under the other governmental line for that purpose. Auditing and accounting, there's money in there, obviously for our annual audit, as well as some additional accounting assistance for when questions arise and things come up. Animal control in the 3-year, I think it was a 3-year agreement, 5-year agreement. In the agreement with our animal control officer, there is a slight annual increase that is outlined in the agreement, so that is built in. Also, what we did not have in the 2024 budget was the cost for our impound services with HART. If you remember, that was something that right at the beginning of 2024 of this year, we had been taking animals to be impounded at Babinski Foundation. They weren't charging us for it. They decided that they were no longer going to be taking any impounds from the city of Breezy Point. So we were put in the position we had to contract with HART. So that contract and those fees are also now in the budget. Building maintenance, that was reduced just due to the fact of the intention to move forward with the City Hall project. So we wouldn't need to be doing a lot of, hopefully, much maintenance on a building that we're going to be remodeling. We also did on the police side, continue to maintain that building maintenance account of about $45,000 that allow the police department to replace that last furnace. Also, some of the stucco on the side of the building needs to be repaired. Chief Sandell and Public Works Supervisor Zierden got a quote for that, cost about $30,000. But the police department was successful in getting a grant actually, maybe it was more than 30. The grant was for 30.
The cost for the repairs was $38,000 something. We received a grant for all but approximately $10,000 worth of the repairs.
So with that grant, we'll be able to, the police department will be able to replace that last furnace and also repair the stucco and still have some money left over should any other repairs come up. And then the transfer to other funds, what that is gotten into, and I'll go, actually what I'm going to do is, I guess I'll discuss it now and we'll get more into it capital. So in previous years, the council has budgeted some transfers pretty much to the capital fund. It was we talked about the $572,000 that's been going into the capital fund every single year. So what has happened, as we discussed on August 19th, and I'll go through more detail here shortly, is taking that money plus previous capital expenditures. So the annual squad, which is now part of the equipment capital plan, some public works transfers for capital every single year, now part of the capital plan. Parks transfer every year, now part of the capital plan. We were to take that money plus the 572, it totaled to about $702,000 to use to pay for other projects. So we'll get in here, talk about the City Hall bond. That money was taken out of there. The levy to help cover and fund the equipment capital plan was taken out of there. And then the street maintenance that we talked about, $150,000 for the road improvements was taken out of there as well. Those are existing levy dollars, so that way we could pay for those things without having to add new levy dollars to pay specifically for those things. So that's your general fund. Again, there are some other miscellaneous funds. The EDA fund, which is a levying fund, there's $3,650 is the levy for that. That is all given as a contribution to the Brainerd Lakes Area Economic Development Corporation to assist us with economic development activities. The TIF fund is a non-levying fund, so this is a fund that for any tax increment financing districts, money goes into there, comes in when we get our allocation twice a year, and then based off of the TIF agreement, any TIF agreements, it's then redistributed to the developers. The cemetery fund is a levying fund, but does not rely solely on its levy. If you remember last year, the levy was increased from $9,000 to $20,000 to cover additional professional services, mainly for landscaping, as the cemetery commission was no longer able to do that landscaping themselves, which they had done for almost 2 decades. That is just the $20,000 levy has just been maintained and has not been increased. There's also $5,000 that is transferred out of the cemetery fund and into the capital fund to help cover some of the costs that the Public Works Department incurs doing work at the cemetery. The debt service fund is a levying fund to help cover debt. In the preliminary budget, we do have $280,000 for a bond on the City Hall, as was presented in your August meeting. $280,000 was that top if you chose to bond the entirety of City Hall. Again, this is not new money on the levy. We took the $280,000, we took it out of those previously, that previous 572, or actually 702, once you put in those capital expenditures, and just moved it over into the debt. So we just transferred it from, essentially took it from the general fund and moved it to the debt fund. Also in, there it is. Also in the debt service fund is the payment for the ladder truck on behalf of Pequot Lakes Fire District. Was something we purchased earlier this year. The intent to reimburse ourselves with a bond. That is in the debt service fund, as that's where that would belong. However, it's not an impact on the levy, as that annual payment will be charged to the Pequot Lakes Fire District. So when that's time to pay that annual debt, that bond, it'll just be invoiced to the Pequot Lakes Fire District, and then they'll pay us. Okay, come on. I don't know why something. Okay. So under the capital fund, that was one of the big things at the very beginning we talked about as a change. So the council, we talked about it in July, we talked about it again in August. It's included in the packet is the full CIP, Capital Improvement Plan. And so we reorged the capital fund to represent that. So in 2025, here are the capital expenditures that are proposed. An ERP software acquisition. This is a brand new finance package that would be much more robust than what we currently have, allow for online payments, online permit applications, credit card payments. A lot of the things that we do not have now will be a lot more both beneficial internally, but even more importantly, externally to our residents. The zoning code update, which we already have going, we estimate about $85,000 will be remaining of that $120,000 contract. About $85,000 will still be remaining in 2025. Miscellaneous IT equipment. In the memo, we go down much more in depth about that. That's replacement of or annual replacements of computers, monitors, ticket printers, squad computers for the PD, and then security cameras and door access control updates for the public safety building. Police squad replacement, again, our policy is we replace 1 squad per year. This amount covers the purchase of the squad, purchase of the equipment for the squad, and then the build out of the squad. Ballistic helmets for the police department. A Lucas CPR, this is a device that does chest compressions automatically. This will give us 3, so 1 for each of our officer paramedics and officer EMT. Placement of a night vision system and 2 new mobile speed signs. So these were all discussed in depth during the August 19 workshop. And then $50,000 for parks. That's just for future parks improvements as they come up, as recommended by the Parks Committee. They can make a recommendation to the council of this is what they would like to do. So there's $50,000 per year in the plan for that. So it's kind of saving for future parks. The sewer enterprise fund is not a levying fund. It is an enterprise fund, which means it gets its money not from taxpayer dollars, but from sewer fees. So only those connected to the sewers, the municipal sewer system, pay for this service. Increases in expenditures primarily are to wages and auditing and accounting services, which is split 50-50 between the general fund and the sewer fund. In my memo, I go into in depth that we are hitting about that break-even point between anticipated revenue and anticipated expenditures. And so we will likely be making a recommendation to increase the sewer rates. And we do have Baker Tilly in contract to be working on that and making a recommendation to you, taking into account not just what annual operating is, but also looking at the future sewer expansion, what is that's going to cost, and how can the city essentially get enough revenue to cover those over the next couple of years by increasing rates. Public Works Supervisor Zierden presented you, I believe it was back in May, with a survey that he had done on sewer rates for neighboring communities, and we were by far the lowest. The Sewer Capital Fund, operates similar to our general capital fund in that it is money that's set aside for those significant capital projects. One of the items back in August, the July meeting, I believe actually Councilmember Scott, you brought it up of within that draft capital plan, what items would be more sewer. And so we worked and Public Works Supervisor Zierden identified a number of pieces of equipment that would be followed under that sewer category. And so while there are no public works expenditures in 2025, there's a sewer expenditure. We're recommending the replacement of the 2018 Bobcat Toolcat. It has a cost of about $70,000. I know the intent is to try to trade in the existing one to bring that down. This was an item that we actually switched with, I think it was, I think the skid steer, another item, even though another item was scheduled to be replaced earlier with the increased maintenance costs to the Bobcat. Joe made the recommendation that let's replace the Toolcat ahead of schedule. The other piece of equipment is in good shape and it can be pushed back another year without a problem. This is a pretty much daily used piece of equipment, so it is a significant piece of equipment for the Public Works Department. And then the ERP software, it's a total cost of just shy of $100,000 for that, and that would be split 50-50 between the general fund, the general capital fund, and the sewer capital fund. Also, Terminal Road and Red Oak Lane sewer extension, that's something we're still planning on. We were hoping to have a contract with you in front of you today. However, we are working on, and I know Public Works Supervisor can go into more detail of working with Mr. Wiebolt on the assessment of that, and WIDSEF has recommended an assessment waiver process where pretty much we agree upon this is what their cost would be, and they just agree to pay it, and then we don't have to go through the whole assessment process. Saves them time. I know Mr. Zierden is actually working with Mr. Langle on getting that agreement drafted and then signed by Mr. Wiebolt. Dave Reese with WIDSEF said that his preference would be that we have that agreement in place prior to executing the engineering agreement, just because it might change things if it's not agreed upon or what the agreement is. So that is currently in the works, but we do intend to still do that project next spring. And then the sewer plant expansion permitting, again, continue to work through that process. We have $25,000 to continue to be working with WIDSEF to be continue taking those next steps. So that's in brief of all the expenditures throughout the budget. In total, budgeted expenditures in the general fund, we have a total expenditures of $3,789,358. EDA fund $3,650, cemetery fund $46,000, $325,000, and the debt fund, $415,000. Total comes to $4,254,333. Again, we take from that, we subtract our non-tax revenues, which total about $861,400. And that's how we get to our preliminary levy of a total of $3,385,608, which is $172,090 or 5.4% increase over 2024. Again, with preliminary levies, that can always go down between now and December. It can just not go up. I think there are areas that we are continuing looking at. Again, talking about the assistant city administrator position, how do you want to deal with that? Might have a decrease. Also, there are other areas in revenue. I actually attended an administrators meeting last week where we were presented by Sourcewell, their new funding mechanisms. And then there is about $72,000 that I was able to identify that the city can kind of preliminarily apply for this fall and then get approved for ahead of time. And then if approved for, that would then allow us to then reduce the levy by an additional $72,000. So there are continuing ways we will be looking between now and the final being adopted in December to continue keep that, refine that number and lower that number. Again, at the end, in December, the final levy cannot be higher than this, but it can be lower. So as I talked about up front, and is in the front page of the budget memo, I did run some potential property tax implementation calculations. These are 20 properties, random 20 properties throughout the city. These are the same properties that I used last year when I did the same presentation. The only thing that is unique about, or on the same about all of them, is that they are single-family homesteaded properties. Otherwise, they are all selected at random from throughout the community, and I think do give a good representation. I will say that when I went to update the numbers from last year, what was the estimated property tax for 2024 and their actual, the estimate was actually within $20 for pretty much all of them, and most of the properties were actually under the estimate. So I am confident, fairly confident in these estimates. Again, so you'll see on the left side, that's the 2024 property value, their 2024 city taxes. Then it goes to their preliminary 2025 property values. What is the change in their value? And then again, based off of their market value, and then the tax rate of 35.100%, what their estimated city taxes will be. You'll see that there is a wide range. For some people, their taxes, you do see a decrease. Some people see an increase. A lot of it, again, is based off of what did their property value do? What did the assessor do with their values? Did their value go up? Did their value go down? You'll see at the very bottom is kind of an average across all 20 properties of an increase of about $14.81. Again, that's not for everybody. That's an average. You'll see there are some people, I think the greatest reduction, there's one property, I think it's property 15, would see a tax cut of $150.97 over 2024. Yet there are some properties like property 20 that see a $204.97 increase over 2024, and that's primarily because they had a 14% property value increase. So you'll see, again, some people would experience a decrease, some would experience an increase with this preliminary levy. So with that, Mayor, members of the council, that is, in short, the preliminary 2025 budget and levy. Take any questions you have, any discussions you would like to have. The goal here, at the end of this discussion, would be to adopt the memo that is, or not memo, resolution that is attached to set the preliminary levy and to set the budget meeting for December 2nd at 6:30. And that would be your formal, what they used to call the truth and taxation hearing.
Thank you. I just want to say I'm really proud of the city because of everything that we've actually accomplished the last 2 years and everything that we've gotten the ball rolling. I think residents should be very proud of what we're seeing in this levy and what we are continuing to doing. So thank you, Mr. Chansky, for that. Anybody else have any comments on the levy?
I don't have any other questions at this time.
I don't have any at this time either. It's preliminary.
I don't either.
Motion?
I'll make a motion to approve resolution, where'd it go? The resolution to adopt the preliminary budget in the amount of $3,385,608.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the speed study petition.
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, on Friday, we did receive a petition from Terry Schoberg of 29555 Percheron Drive to conduct a traffic study on Percheron, Belgium, Suffolk, and Dakota Drives. The petition is attached. Is Ms. Schoberg here? Okay. Madam Mayor, I recommend you hear from her and regarding their petition to have a speed study done.
I just got a new hip and it gets a little cranky when I sit too long. So I'm Terry and this is my husband Kirk, and so thank you for allowing me to speak to you guys tonight. This is something that is on the heart and minds of a lot of our community here. So I'm speaking with a collaborative voice, kind of all of these people. The thing that's been interesting about this project is I don't think I was at any house for less than 40 minutes with everyone sharing their very personal stories about what has transpired with the compost yard and what that has done to our quality of life. It's not the compost yard. So, this is the second year we, the homeowners, have had tried to share a voice in an attempt to do something about the community safety concerns. And the red flags are everywhere. So we have completely unmarked speed designations on our roads. And we have a lot of people using those roads to access the compost yard that don't live here. They don't care how fast they go. And yes, they speed. So, as you are very well aware, the placement of the compost yard within the very quiet neighborhood community has increased traffic volume, the size of the vehicles that travel the roadways, their trailers, the speed of the vehicles, and the blatant disregard and disrespect of the safety of the members of our community, which are our families, our children, our property, our pets, and the beautiful four-legged creatures that share our properties and call it their home as well. So many of the vehicles that are traveling the roads now, which is way different, are very large diesel vehicles, and they are four-wheel drive, and they are very large construction-type trucks with 2 and 3 axles on their trailers. Those are big trailers. And they are loaded, not just with the branches that come down in a storm, but they are loaded with the logs of the big trees that are being removed from, I think, people's properties where they are building homes, and they clear the property. And it is the contractors that are bringing them down there. The loads are unsecured, and they're very bulky. And when you have 2 of those vehicles coming and going at the same time, we don't have any shoulders on our roads, which usually is okay. But in this case, if you are walking, riding a bicycle, in a golf cart, you had better head for the ditch, because our lives are not safe out there anymore. Our traffic to the compost yard begins as early as 6 a.m. in the spring, summer, and fall. Really reduces in the winter, of course. And it continues well into dusk and dark, 7 days a week. Because this rural residential neighborhood community offers so many of the wonderful outdoor activities, which is the reason why so many of us own here, it means that we often are backing our trailers, our pontoons, our ATVs, backing out our campers, and backing out our own vehicles at really our own risk at this point. So when we ride our bikes, we walk with our friends and our relatives and our family members and our dogs, or we jog, or we ride our bikes or the golf course. We do that in the community where we live. And so we are experiencing all this in our front yards. We are not safe, and our lives are threatened every time a vehicle or two with a large unsecured load headed for the compost yard speeds 40, 45, and sometimes up to 50 miles an hour. Having told this story, we, the community, are requesting the posting of 25-mile-an-hour speed limit signs on Percheron, Belgian, Dakota, and Suffolk. And I've had people approach me from Dove in both directions, coming and going to the compost yard. It's one thing to go there, but especially the commercial vehicles, time is money, and so they're in and out fast. We all know that controlling speed limits saves lives. We also request that the yard possibly be posted with a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Sunday, which is standard approved hours for construction work in residential areas. You know, and we all know, the compost yard is posted and designated for the Breezy Point residents only. You know, and we know, because we live with it, that the rules are being ignored. And the contractors and individuals who do not live in Breezy Point are abusing the use of the yard. We all know also that rules are not effective, policies, regulations, if they are not enforced. And it's a tough job to figure out how to enforce that. But it needs to be done. So we ask you to please accept the petition with our signatures requesting of this Breezy Point City Council to do the right thing, to embrace our concerns for our community safety, and to act on the posting of 25-mile-an-hour speed limits, which will significantly improve our community safety. Our lives depend on it. Things need to slow down. So I have a couple of information sheets up here that I'll leave, and if anyone is interested, it comes from the Minnesota Department of Transportation, and they are stopping distances. So this is what we can look forward to with oversized vehicles hauling large loads down our road. And it's at 40, your braking distance is 118 feet. So that's a lot. So thank you for hearing us, and we look forward to something proactive happening before something very bad happens.
I'd like to thank you for coming up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do live on Crow Circle, so.
Percheron.
I live on Crow Circle.
yeah.
So many of those big trucks think that our dead end is the compost, so they come speeding down and slamming on their brakes prior. So I'm absolutely in favor of moving forward with something like this. And actually, we did budget $10,000 to look at 2 to 3 more digital speed signs, which we have seen to decrease the speed, so.
Yeah, and so is the data being collected so that it can be analyzed? and-
Yeah, we have only one right now, and that is on Dove right now. And so we'll have to just look at how we can transfer that, if that's what we decide to do.
For
But
the size of the vehicles that are coming, until something is done about it, we really feel that 35 is too much. If you post 35, people are gonna drive 40.
Right,
So that's why we're asking for 25
okay.
to control it.
And there's lots of kids, including mine, so.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
So at this time, I think of any discussion from the council, if you'd like to proceed with having a study conducted, I'm sure Chief Sendell and Public Works Supervisor Zierden can put together a plan of action for you. Maybe even discuss it at your September workshop if you would like, and be able to implement such a study.
I think it's a good idea to do the study. I personally believe that the compost site is being abused by commercial vehicles, that some of the work is being done in Breezy Point. That's legitimate. But I think there's plenty of the vehicles that are from outside the area coming in to use our site. You know, if a contractor is removing trees within the city limits, that's perfectly fine. I mean, it's their right then to have that contractor dump there. I actually went before the road committee, I think it was 2022, because of Sharpview Lane. I mean, I get the comments, they're spot on. Actually, I told the city that the state made it easier to lower speed limits, but you still have to do speed studies, comply to lower them. You know, the police do an excellent job in our community, but they can only enforce when they're there. You know, same with the public works. I mean, council discussed and directed staff to find an alternate location, which I don't know, you know, if we'll be able to find one, but I think it's worthwhile. But it also brings to light, I mean, you have the so-called bird lanes. I live on Shoreview Lane. There is numerous roads and streets in this city that are curvy, blind intersections. I mean, it's all throughout the city. That is part of the ad hoc road committee. I think we should look at universally lowering speeds. I mean, the cities are doing it. Minneapolis and St. Paul has done it. I think it's time. Residents, there's numerous residents throughout the city that have these issues, and I'm glad the group signed the petition, and it's something we need to take very seriously. So part of it can be the street, you know, the traffic study, but I think it needs to be addressed citywide. And the state of Minnesota has made it a lot easier to lower the speeds.
We still have to do a citywide speed study.
Yep.
I don't know if you guys knew that or not, but
Yeah,
state
it is
statute
citywide.
requires that we do a citywide speed study in order to do that. So I think that's something that maybe we should consider, considering the growth of Breezy Point. Things have changed. And so I definitely agree.
Yeah, it has to be citywide.
I would also be in favor, even if we don't move the entrance, looking at some kind of entrance for if you have a key card or a number, so that nobody can go in there unless you're actually a resident. Again, something else we've talked about.
Yeah, I
so-
agree. It's, to me, locking it down. I mean, you can't hire somebody to sit there and monitor it 7 days a week. You know, Joe has looked into that. It can be locked down. You know, residents can accompany a contractor to open it. You know, they live within the city. They have a right to use it, whether they do it themselves or a contractor. But I think it should be a global-wide city, the whole city. The outcome of when I went for the road committee and council was just cautionary signs, but you know, again, there's so many streets in this city that should be at 25 miles an hour. And now's a good time with an ad hoc road committee. Yeah, well, Dove, I mean, there's just numerous. I mean, there's, to the comment of no shoulders, the majority of our streets don't have shoulders. You know, there's not drainage easements, there's not utility easements. I mean, it is what it is. That we can't change, but we can certainly lower speed limits.
Could we potentially get a estimate on what you think it would cost I know you're leaving soon, but to do a citywide speed study and to understand that and to figure out how we could implement that into the budget for 2025. I'm not really sure like how much they typically cost, but it would be nice to at least.
That would be something I think we'd discuss with Woods as our city engineer.
Okay. Okay, I think that'd be very helpful so we can budget it for next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, and if this is going to be something that is going to take a while to figure out how best to manage, because this really, to me, every bit centers around the location of the compost site. And it gets into some of the reasons why I brought up in June concerns with how that site is functioning, is being operated within a residential area. If this is truly going to take several months in order for us to settle on how best to mitigate known risks that exist with traffic and people, I would really like to see us figure out how can we do some traffic calming measures right now. I don't remember if we talked about, I know this came up at our June workshop, but I don't remember if we talked about any potential interim measures. I mean, things that come to mind are, those bumps, if you will, for lack of a better description, that you put in the road, as a way to, let people know you better slow down. That could be very well just one example among many, but I would really hate to see the city not do something, not take some direct specific steps towards figuring out how we keep vehicle and people as safe as possible. I know good and well we all want to avoid any situation where someone gets hurt or seriously injured as a result of what we heard tonight. And again, to me, this is just one concern among several that truly exists with the location of the compost and where that service is located in the community.
Just a comment, Brad, on the speed bumps. That's something myself and a neighbor had proposed for Shoreview Lane, even temporary, but the city did not want to do it at the time. You can't leave them permanent because of snow plowing, but that was what we had looked for as well at that time, but it never was able to.
One of the things,
Move
if memory
forward.
serves me correctly, was even if you could legally post it down to 25, some of those speed bumps, if you approach it at the legal speed limit of 25, could cause damage to your car, lose control of it. I know the idea was to slow them down, but if anybody took it at the legal posted speed sign, that was an issue. Snow plowing for permanent ones was an issue. I know when we did Shoreview, I believe it was a number of steps that we did. We both did both egress and ingress of the road, and we measured it, we collected data, and then after that, we did post the cautionary 20 mile per hour signs and recalculated it to see what the traffic patterns were doing at that time. And at that point, it did show a reduction, and so that's why we left the implementation of the cautionary speed signs. It was a lengthy process, but it was good data, it was good practice to go through that we did, so I'm in favor of doing it on these roads here.
Yeah, I am too, and I don't disagree that a citywide study would be a good idea, because I think it would be at this point, but if we can move forward with these specific roads at this time, I think that would be best, just to address that particular issue. And obviously, if we can move that compost site, that would be ideal at this point too.
And she even brought up some good ideas, which we've talked about, gating it and posting the hours. So those are all good suggestions that I know we're working towards. At this time, Mr. Chansky, would you be looking for a motion to direct staff to come up with a plan?
Yeah, I think that would probably be best. Like I said, defer to
Or
Chief
just-
Sendell and Public Works Supervisor Zierden, but I would say probably take what you've heard and bring what the plan is, and then come back with you with a plan to approve. I think would probably be the.
Do we need to see the plan, or can we just say enact on a speed study?
It's up to you. Do you want, if you want to review it, or do you want them to just use their best judgment? I guess that's up to you as a council.
Well, we have to wait till the spring, just because during the winter, it would not be very, as accurate.
I will say probably, and I know Mr. Zierden could probably speak this better than me, but we are going to fall, so I'm pretty sure the brush pile is going to be used a lot. So
Okay.
if there's actually a time to study it, I would say probably now is probably the time to
Okay,
study it.
if we can move that fast, I mean, that would.
Yeah, that would be.
I would say
Fine with that.
in favor of trying to get as much data as possible, I
I would defer to Mr. Zierden though, so he might not agree with me on that, so.
Yeah, fall typically when the leaves are falling. It's busy. Spring, same deal. I think Brian would be a good resource for, we have one sign. You put it in one spot for a week. I think there'd be a pretty limited amount of area we could cover, so it'd be nice to have some kind of an idea of what's our primary road to look at. Just so we have something to discuss, the rest of the week.
Right, a location would be good, and then, once we are downloading that data, Sergeant Garcia has to be available to download that data before we move the sign someplace else. And then just one other point of clarification, if we're talking about reducing the speeds anywhere, you have to look at all roads throughout the city that are similar to that road. So you can't just look at one portion, it requires you look citywide and compare all similar roads.
Which might help if there are other areas that need to be reduced. I mean, is that kind of,
It's a requirement, you have to look at all similar roads when reducing a speed, so.
okay.
Now, I don't know if you can take something as small as just, well, this is a dump site and the others don't have it to exclude others. I don't know if that works. I just know it states that you have to look at all similar roads.
Yeah, I recall the discussion. It was something we wouldn't do ourselves. Essentially, it would have to be an outside firm to hit every road. That's what I remember of that discussion.
But we can certainly collect data at any point.
Okay, perfect.
Do you have a recommendation, Chief? So I just pulled up on the GIS, the section we're talking about. Would it be probably somewhere on Perch Run? If the sign had to go somewhere, obviously we have one sign.
Yeah.
Do you have a
Right,
recommendation of where
so
you think it would
I would
best be?
say,
There's a hill on Percheron though, that makes cars go even faster, because that's when it kind of comes down.
right, but personally, I think a lot of people are probably accessing it from Suffolk.
They are.
Right, it's coming off Dove Street to Suffolk, so you don't want to be closer to the dump site to get the majority of the traffic.
That's where I typically access it, and I think a lot of
A
people
lot of
do.
people do, yeah. That's the main one, just because no one kind of goes in the middle as much, but not that they don't.
Especially the commercial or the larger vehicles, I think to your point, I agree.
I guess whatever you guys recommend, I would say is the best way to go.
But that is certainly a characteristic of that road that I think, needs to get highlighted is when you come down Percheron, I mean, you do have a pretty good, as we all know, hill to go down. And if you're driving a how many ton vehicle loaded down with wood, I mean, you're going to pick up quite a bit of speed. So
Correct.
I would tend to agree wherever we can get the information from that Suffolk, Percheron, kind of down to the Dakota Drive area is, to me, what would feel like be the important area to focus on.
Yeah, I agree.
Do we need a motion?
I think it'd be great. I guess what I'm hearing is get the speed sign placed and then further information for a later date on what you would like to do for potential citywide. I find.
We have a data request coming in shortly for information from Dove Street.
Okay.
So once that info is downloaded, we can move it immediately,
Okay.
or as soon as Public Works is able.
Right, perfect. Motion?
I would make a motion to accept the petition for a speed study to be conducted, I guess as we discussed, in that Suffolk, Percheron area as it goes down to the compost site.
I'll second.
All right, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, so do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda or amend?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We will move on to new business. Donation of sign for disc golf course.
Good evening. Shane Humphrey, 4556 Main Street, Pequot Lakes. And yeah, donating a sign and hoping for your approval.
All right. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't know why you cut it off. Sorry, Shane. I don't know why I did that.
That's all right. Generic rendering anyway, no color on it. It's a 30 by 30 sign, if that helps, and then 32 by 30, excuse me. I'll provide 2 4x4 by 8 foot posts as well. Everything necessary to basically get that in the ground and install. Mr. Zierd and his team will install that once I provide that sign and completion. That is something that I'll be working on here the next couple months when my schedule allows. It'll be a fully constructed sign out of Armorite, weatherproofed. It should last 20, 30 years. And I'll be doing maintenance on that in the future, putting clear coats on that every 2 years. And all that's free.
Well, we very much appreciate that.
Thank you.
All right. Do I need a motion to accept donation?
I'll make a motion to accept the donation.
A second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, we'll go on to the small pavilion relocation.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So with the acceptance of the bid on the City Hall remodel and expansion project, we are still on schedule to commence construction in mid to late September, so just a couple weeks from now. One of the first things that High Tech Construction is going to need to do is to relocate the small pavilion. During the design process, I did have building official Scott Skidusky go and look at that pavilion. He deemed it is in great condition, and there's no reason just to demo it and get rid of it. It's still a good asset. So within the project budget is a budget for the pavilion to be relocated. We did take the opportunity to go before the Parks and Recreation Committee on August 8th during their meeting to have them discuss where they think it would be best to have it located. They kind of came down to 2 locations, potential locations, one being the new disc golf course parking lot somewhere out there. The other location being on the east side of the basketball courts over here, so just essentially moving it 150 yards from its current location over to the side. I do have renderings, so that's the current location right here on the north side. Its current location essentially will be the new parking area. So the new, somewhere on the disc, this is Google Maps, so it's obviously not the most updated aerial, but somewhere in here, I know they'd work with Public Works Supervisor Zierden and the Public Works and the Parks Committee to figure out what is the correct best spot for it. I know we've discussed in the past somewhere either down here or up on the northern side, generally a flat area where it could go, or their other area was kind of in this area on the east side of the basketball court. So that was 2 location options. They also discussed if they couldn't come to an agreement on a consensus on where it should go, placing it somewhere else temporarily until they can come to a conclusion, bring a new recommendation to the council, and have it placed in the spring. Or their 4th discussion item was to have it just donated to the Pequot Lakes School District for use at Eagleview Elementary School, which we've been told they would readily accept. So the Parks Committee intends to do site visits as part of their regular meeting next week. They'll be meeting at the disc golf course parking lot at 5 p.m., then relocating the City Hall Park at 5:30 p.m., and then reconvening in the chambers here for the rest of their meeting at 6. So that'll be all noticed so people know where they're going to be and when, so they can also go to those locations. As a kind of decision is going to need to be made, what the Parks Committee has pretty much requested is that the council review and essentially pre-approve any or all 4 of these options. So once they come to a consensus, that information can be given to High Tech. I did ask Andy Picard, who is here with High Tech, about relocating the structure. They said if there isn't a in a decided location now and it's relocated somewhere else, maybe we put it in the outfield of the baseball field or in that overflow parking area, and then relocate it in the spring to a permanent location, that is doable. However, there will be some additional cost as it's going to, essentially they have to remobilize to do that. So I think what we're looking for, so we can take back to the committee, is the council okay with any 4 of these options, or are there any options that you would not like, you are not in favor of when it comes to these 4 options, so that the committee can make an informed decision next week?
Well, it's no surprise, I definitely would not be in favor of nor see it being all that practical to have it moved to the disc golf course parking lot. I just don't see that as being a beneficial or necessary approach as to how that structure gets utilized. I am interested in donating it to Eagle View, and if someone, I know we've got a couple of park board members here tonight, may want to speak to that and how that came up as an approach. That is one, to me, that without knowing really how often that pavilion gets used, kind of feels like maybe a good way of approaching it, allowing the school district to utilize it while not continuing to have this question mark out there as to where is it going and how much more is it going to cost to find its final placement. So.
The Megan Zierden, Park and Rec Committee. The discussion of the Eagle View was, if all else failed, we wouldn't want it to be trashed. Like, it's a valuable piece and a usable piece. And it would be used in the idea was if all else didn't work out, this would be the last option. I want that to be prefaced, that we're not assuming, and I'm no longer an employee of the district either, so please. But it would be used in the back nature center area. It would provide another outdoor classroom space. Back in COVID, we created about 8 different outdoor classroom spaces that the entire school uses, along with Deanne Trottier. She's also a committee member of the Park and Rec Committee that runs our eSTEM program. It's a specials that every child gets to participate in, and learning about environmental science and taking care of our outdoors activities, and so it would be a space that would be used by up to 600 children potentially in that building. Whether it's a shelter from taking off their snowshoes or, something like that. But she had mentioned something about it becoming a possible another outdoor classroom space that is designated for teachers to use, including herself. So that's where that idea came, was if it was going to be tossed or thrown, please don't do that.
Right.
We could find use, they could find use for it at Eagle View. It would be the back side of the building, so that's where gardens and all the wild rice and all the ponds are and things, so.
And I would say, and I've said this before, I 100% trust our committee to make the best decision. So any one of those 4 that they would recommend, I would be in favor of.
Bill Toft, Green Scene Drive, Breezy Point, and I think it'd be awesome if we gave it to the school. And that's the kind, I did a survey, I don't know if you can get this on there, Mr. Chansky, on Nextdoor, about given the 2 selections, which one would they choose to, only taxpayers is what I asked to vote on this. And it was 31 for the basketball court and 6 for the disc golf course expansion. The one comment that I really like that I received from talking to residents with that, the gazebo would get reused a lot more at the basketball court. It would definitely get used at the school a lot. So I think that's a great alternative. We had talked about the community garden also, but that didn't fly. So just wanted to let you know the survey was 31-6 for the outdoor basketball court. And I would like to speak also at some point about the bathroom, if I'm allowed to. Thank you.
Yeah.
I guess I'm in favor of either the basketball court or the school. I think is a phenomenal idea. I walk my dog quite a bit at the park. I see a lot of young families bringing food for their kids. You know, they're sitting out on the picnic tables in the sun, the open areas, you know, having something there would be nice. I personally think another location is that beach volleyball. I don't think that gets moved or used very often, but I think to narrow it down to the school and or, you know, east of the basketball court.
The beach was a location that was briefly discussed, but pretty quickly removed just for the amount of space it would take up like half the beach.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Councilman Jensen. I think by the basketball court would be nice, just because I do think it is used quite a bit. I agree. I do see parties there and things like that, so I think it is used. So if that space works, I think that would be good. But donation to this school is definitely a good option too. So.
I think one issue I will say just that Public Works Supervisor Zierden did bring up about that location, not necessarily a reason not to put it there. He just mentioned that the sanitary line for Joe, is it both City Hall and the Public Safety Building or just Public Safety?
Just public safety.
Does run essentially right here. So if you do place it there, obviously you'll be sticking it on top of a line. And if it should ever have to get maintained, you'd have to move the pavilion, but that's a if.
Okay.
So I don't think it was any reason that we said don't put it there. It was just something we wanted to make sure people were aware of, that if something were to happen to that line in that location, it had to be accessed, the pavilion would have to be removed to be able to access the line. But I don't think Joe had any super concerns about that other than that. We just wanted to make sure people were aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah, that line's same age as the building, the PSB building. So, and nowadays there's in-ground replacement. I mean, there's other options, but in my time here, we've not replaced sewer lines. It's more commonly service lines, the small lines that are closer to the surface. So.
Does that sewer line also run under where the community garden?
Yes.
Okay, so.
I have a question. Because I love the idea of it going to the school as well. Can the public use it as well if it's on school property, or no? Or is that only used for, I was just curious.
I think it would be kind of along the lines, I can't speak completely the details, but I do know the general use of the public spaces after school hours. I would assume that people they could go back and go by the pumpkin patch and things like that after school, as long as there aren't the kid connection.
Yep.
You know, it's more a security safety thing, but as long as it's not being used, the park can be used, the fields can be used, just like, I would assume that space could be used as well.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, I really didn't have an issue with any of them. I prefer the non-demolition that they came up with as a donation. My least favorite was the putting in a holding grounds, and I think they had some great discussion that we don't have a master plan yet for that disc golf course area of, we've talked about park, we've talked about a lot of different options. So in my mind, the park committee, whichever, but I like the idea of where we're leading down with those two options of directing the park committee.
Yeah, I think it's their choice. I mean, I think, let them decide, and,
But are we narrowing it to just those two?
I mean, I wouldn't. I mean, my personal preference is like, I think that they would be able to choose the best option. I don't know if we need to actually narrow it down.
Well, I'll just add, Madam Mayor, if the council is not, what they're looking for, the intent here is once they decide that's where it's going. So if the council is not comfortable going to the disc golf course, then I would say then tell the Parks Committee now, you cannot go to the disc golf course.
I think that they would be able to make that decision as a committee, considering everything they've done.
I think we narrow it down to two, or what the consensus on the council seems to be, the basketball court location
Yeah, I think we
and
do
or
too.
donation
I mean, why?
to school. So those are the two choices.
Yeah, in fact, I'll make a motion to ask the park committee to consider the relocation of the pavilion to either the City Hall Park basketball court area or donating it to Pequot Lake School District for use at Eagle View Elementary.
Second.
Well, my biggest thing is, even though I have a preference of those two, I don't want to limit the committee from, you know, their ability to do what they're there to do. And so, I don't think that us narrowing it down is necessary. I think I trust them to do that. So that's why I wouldn't be in favor of narrowing it down, even though I do support those two options.
And I just want to clarify that my motion in no way has to do with a question of trust. I fully trust the park committee, the people that are on it, and their decision-making capability. This has everything to do with, at the end of the day, when it comes to city assets and how they are utilized and fit into a service being provided, it is a council decision, and a council decision only.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, you know, again, I'll go back to the disc golf course. It's an idea, but I think that getting that master plan together of how we want to see that develop really should kind of come first before we place something out there that we don't know is that the best fit for it the long term. So, I think we have two valuable options, either donation or by the basketball court, to have it sit somewhere for non-use, so.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Motion carries. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to the bathrooms.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So on January 2nd, the council adopted a number of actions to be done at the disc golf course expansion. One of them was a placement of a portable bathroom on the north end of the course. As such, the Parks Recreation Committee has been working with Public Works Supervisor Zierden on an ideal location. There have been some meetings that weren't had, trying to figure out where it would go. The committee discussed it yet again at their August 8th meeting. There are currently two portable bathrooms at the disc golf courses, one in the new parking lot, one in the old parking lot. There were two documented incidences of public urination on the disc golf course expansion this spring. Both occurred prior to the expansion or the bathrooms being placed. I confirmed with Chief Sandell, we don't have any documented since they were in place any further. Both public urination situations were responded to by the police department, and they interacted with the individuals. The committee was discussing, and I think that's what also led to the recommendation of putting one on the north side of the course. I think in both situations, the issue was someone was out in the course, they're deep in the course, and it's going to take them 15, 20 minutes to get back to the parking lot, and so they relieve themselves in the woods. During this discussion, a couple of neighbors around that north side of that course either penned a letter or came to the committee saying that they were not necessarily in favor of having a portable bathroom placed on that north side, mainly because they just didn't want it behind their homes. So during the discussion on August 8th, the committee voted to make a recommendation to the council to not place a bathroom on the north side at this time. They felt like they would rather just take the time, as it's already near the end of the season, to continue to observe and see if there are any additional issues, additional violations, and then if something does come up, then come back to the council and make a recommendation to place something. Joe, is there anything that you wanted to add to that?
Sure. Just in the cost estimates, one thing that I thought I didn't account for very well would be tree removal. For the longer pass, like with a 20-foot easement, most likely we'd have to pay someone to drop the tree in place so it's not crashing on private property. It's like $300 to $600 a tree. I didn't know how to estimate that, but the longer the path, potentially the more cost. And at that point, We didn't, we didn't have direction to investigate any further, but I would think it would be significant for those 2 longer routes.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Is there a way to make it so the doors don't slam? I know that's something that one of the residents brought up. I mean, I know it's silly, but I guess if it was busy day and the doors were slamming, is there something?
I don't know.
That on a
I could
porta potty
ask.
door? I mean, I'm not sure because I can
There's
see that.
different models. I mean, I don't know. I would have to ask Joe Osborne. I think it's just the general color and, feel of the portable toilet.
There are concerns of obviously smell.
Yep.
If it's a hot weekend and a busy weekend and it goes a week without getting, how often, Joe, do they currently get pumped?
They're clean weekly.
Okay,
Oh,
weekly.
okay.
So,
That's good.
but if it's, a hot, busy weekend, I think we all know porta potties have a smell. So I think that was a concern that was raised by the neighbors as well.
All right. Anybody else have any questions?
I don't know, Chief Sandell, did you have any, it looked like you might have had a comment on the urination or concerns there from an enforcement
Not in
perspective?
reference to the
Okay.
restrooms, no.
So I guess, I think that the committee is looking for is, again, their recommendation. I don't know if any of the, again, park committee members want to speak any further to that, if that was a good summary, or if they want to share, again, furthermore of their discussion. I don't know, I think Mr. Toff said he might want to.
Yeah, I don't think there's a way you can fix the slamming door. That particular neighbor does work on a golf course in the summer, so she's very familiar with that sound, and there's no way you can muzzle that. The way the course is designed, most golf courses, 1 through 9, ends up by the clubhouse or their bathrooms when they can sell them something. The continuous loop that this golf course offers, there's no natural place to put that bathroom halfway through. And most of the neighbors that I spoke to didn't want it by hole 10, because that's where the 6 homes are. They wanted it over by 13, where there's really doesn't going to bother anybody. And, I think I sent you all a picture today of somebody I took, you going to the bathroom down there about 2 weeks ago. I don't know if you looked at it or not. But, it is difficult to tell what they're doing when they're standing with their back to you and their hands are like this, and they stand there for 45 seconds. I have to make the assumption. I do play a lot of golf, and I know guys go in the bathroom, and it's a lot more wide open at a golf course than it is down there. So I know what's happening down there, contrary to what we've heard. I guess I don't expect anything to be done this year because we're at the end of the season, but I think next year it would be good to have a porta potty down there, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the whole 13 is that what we're deciding on, whether
So
or
the
not
one
it's-
up here right now, so this is the whole 13 option 2, so where it's further in. This is whole 13 option 1. So the idea would be coming off of
Ridge.
Blue Ridge, yeah, thank you, Joe. Coming off of Blue Ridge versus Green Scene. And I think, and this is again where Joe was just talking about, this is a much smaller easement. Well, they're about the same size and just having to clear to get to it. I think the idea here was that it's less of a walk for the, they don't have to trudge off course to get to the bathroom. But then you do have to get a path so that the pump truck or the pump, they can get down there and pump it out versus it being right next to the road.
Was there any opposition to hole 13 or just 10?
I think from what I heard, and Megan and Bill can correct me, Joe, I think most of it was the preference was 13.
Okay.
I don't know if they loved either of them, but the preference was 13 because there were less homes nearby.
Okay.
Is that a correct assessment?
I think the gal that did come and share had valid points, and we wanted to listen to her. And I don't know if she likes the idea at all of any of it, but I don't know if it was one particular option or the other.
Well, the benefit too of 13 is you kind of have that property that kind of wedges out, so that you could build a surround and to be a little bit further away from property lines. Whereas if you're over by 10, it's a small corridor, so it'd be right amongst those property lines. You know, not too far away from it, where 13 gets you a little bit further in, but at an added cost with the tree taking down. Joe, you mentioned about the 20-foot width. Would you have to go 20 foot, probably close to the 20 foot to get the service truck going down there?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
I mean, I guess I wouldn't get too carried away with making a decision tonight, because honestly, I don't have time to do it this year. If I had a direction when I do have time, where I could do further investigation, because I didn't walk both areas. I looked at the topographic maps, and you know, they're accurate enough. I think it would be possible, but without, I don't want to waste a ton of time walking everywhere without being more focused.
Sure.
Because we're kind of busy this year. That would help me, and then I could probably give more information. And like as far as IDing the property lines, that'd kind of be the tricky part though. Because we did not originally survey that side of the course, because it was out of where we were building. So, you know, we use Onyx, which gets us reasonably close, but yeah, that's where I'm at with it. I mean, earliest would be maybe next year, and I'd have to do more research, because the tree number, I think, could really surprise you.
I guess I'm okay with, you know, not placing it this year, but next year, if it is option, you know, hole 13, 1 and 2, I would like for council to be able to, if they want, go out there with Public Works and physically see it, look at the homes. I mean, it's one thing to look at the picture, but it's another thing to be physically on the property, look at, okay, here's the long run, here's the short run, you know.
I would be interested in that too, is what is the impact on, I know there's less homes, but I mean,
There's
now that
still
we've gone through what we've gone through
Yes.
with it, I would agree, like holding off for now and then revisiting it once you have the time to do some more research. Maybe there's some other options. I
At
don't
the end of the day, this should have been done a couple of years ago.
I'm good with holding off as well. All right. We need a motion
I think a motion would be, because there was direction to place one,
to
whether.
bring it back to council.
Well, yeah, if you'd like Joe to do further, if there's a specific, whether it's both or a specific option you would like him to further investigate and come back to, I think would be good.
I'd be fine with looking at more in detail. Do you think it's something like a winter project that you'd be able to walk through January, December, knowing your
Possibly
schedule?
late this fall.
This fall still yet, so.
Yeah.
Easier to do with the trees down, leaves down?
Yes. Yep.
Off condition. Okay. So make a motion to direct staff to further investigate and bring back, when time allows, to further investigate on both options, all 4 options, I should say.
Yeah, or potentially other options, I think.
Or other
Yeah,
options.
if there's other ones that work better, yeah, I don't know.
Is that a second? Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, we'll go on to the food drive request.
Councilmember Jensen, would you like to discuss your request?
Yes, I made the request to Administrator Chansky. I volunteer at the Lakes Area Food Shelf, as does Mr. Toft. And last year, we did food drives from November through January, as well as April, which is National Food Shelf Month within the state of Minnesota, and requesting to do it again this year. As with last year, I brought all the donations over to Lakes Area Food Shelf for both of the drives, and I'm willing to do that again. And the dates were November 18th through January 6th. And I think it was effective using the city's social media, the Nextdoor, as well as Facebook. But the Lakes Area Food Shelf is very busy, and the needs there have increased well over 100%, and that's most of the food shelves. So I think it was a worthy cause. I think it was a success, and Lakes Area Food Shelf needs all the help that they can get.
I think that's a great idea. I'd make that motion to approve that, November 18th through January 6th.
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. We're going to take a quick 5-minute recess before we move on to City Hall. All right, we will go ahead and move on to City Hall bonding.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of Madam Mayor, members of the council, thank you. So last month we discussed bonding for the City Hall project. Michaela Huot with Baker Tilly was present, presented 3 different bond run scenarios. And then you asked a number of questions to come back with and follow up with. Attached to the packet is a memo from Baker Tilly and Ms. Huot regarding, to address most of your questions, specifically putting those bond runs side by side, which was a request, so you could see how each one looks like against each other and they're not just separate documents. Also, she has some discussion in here about call options and effects of those and different bonding scenarios, whether you bonded still this year or early next year. Ms. Huot is, Michaela, are you still with us? You are muted.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, so Michaela is with us. Michaela, I think as we discussed, I think the best thing at this point, maybe you just want to run quickly through your memo and then we'll have further discussion with the City Council.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, David, and good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I know we've talked through these numbers at the previous council discussion on financing for the City Hall, but again, as a quick overview, we looked at a side-by-side comparison of 3 financing options, and the difference between each of those is how much of the $2.95 million project cost for the City Hall would be financed through bond financing as compared to cash financing. So again, the 3 options include bond financing for 100% of the project costs. Option 2 would be cash financing of $450,000 with the remaining amount as bond financing. And option 3 is increasing that cash contribution to about $950,000 and then remaining bond financing of $2,065,000. And I will point out that when we're saying bond financing of those amounts, that would be the par amount of the bonds, which would include financing of the 2.95 deposit to the project cost plus some associated cost of issuance and then small rounding costs. From our last conversation, the assumptions for financing are similar. We did look at, in this scenario, bond financing date of December with dated date of December 19th, which would be the estimated date that the city would receive the bond proceeds. Interest payments would be semi-annually. First interest payment would be December 15th of 2025 with the first principal the following year. There would be a fairly standard call provision date in which the bonds could be refinanced of December 1st of 2034. We have assumed a 15-year amortization with level annual debt service. And then regarding the rating of the city, we've assumed current rating would be a AA. These would be general obligation bonds and bank qualified interest rates. So the 45 plus 45, we factored into some cushion to the current interest rate assumptions, factoring in about 45 basis points from the current estimates up to the time of the sale, so that there would be some potential future adjustments to rates, but that is the assumption. Again, the deposit for the City Hall portion is the $2.95 million. We've also included for reference or for illustration of the total debt service would be financing for the ladder truck equipment as a separate purpose, but with a separate funding source, but could be included with this financing. So the table at the bottom of this first page that you see is a summary with a side-by-side comparison showing, again, what the par amount would be for each of the three options. The amount of cash or city upfront contribution to reduce the borrowing amount, and then the corresponding deposit to construction fund and COI as costs of issuance. Also for comparison is what the average estimated annual debt service would be with 105% over levy as required for GO financing, general obligation financing. And the fire truck financing is the same average annual debt service, but again, that would be financed by a separate funding source and not included as a levy. But what you'll see is the total comparison of debt service, if looking at the average annual for just the City Hall financing, no cash, all bonding would be annual debt service of about $280,000. 450,000 of cash would result in annual debt service of about 238,000, and then option 3 with the highest cash contribution would reduce that annual debt service levy estimate to about 190,000. So then when combining with the fire truck, you'll see the total debt service estimates ranging from 412,000 with all debt financing down to 322,000 with a higher cash contribution. Some of the questions that were brought up at the last conversation regarding the timing for issuing the bonds for financing of the project costs. So what we looked at is just two comparisons. If you were to issue bonds based on the scenario outlined above, date of December 19th of 2024, as compared to if you waited until March for issuing the bonds and then receiving the proceeds towards the end of March. The financing assumptions or the project cost amounts would be the same. In summary, what we are showing is based on, as I mentioned earlier, when we're sizing the bonds, we always factor into a certain basis point cushion from structuring of the bonds to the actual sale. And then we monitor those rates periodically to understand where we think the rates might actually fall as we get closer to the time of the sale. But based on the timing of now through the up until the March issuance, we're still factoring in basis point cushion. And what we would expect to see is based on that average annual add-on of the interest rate that you would have to see about 10 basis points less to, meaning interest rate would be 10 basis points lower to achieve the same total debt service payments when we're looking at a comparison of December to March. So actually, based on the current trend of rates, the December rates would be projected to be slightly lower. But again, I think the point of it is we're not showing significant interest rate differential between December and March of 2025, knowing that would be continual monitoring. So the last follow-up from the last meeting in question was just understanding what a hypothetical future refunding scenario could look like. And again, what we factored in here is a 10-year call. So December 15th of 2034 would be the earliest that the initial bonds could be refinanced. And it's the remaining term of the bond, so about 5 years is what would be refinanced. And what we, just from a sensitivity scenario, the current interest rates would have to decrease by around 150 basis points to see a minimal 3% savings, which is typically what we look for in order to refinance the bonds. So what that means is essentially the bond rate we took that we used to size the original debt service estimates that I just walked through, we would need to see 150 basis points or 1.5% decrease in interest rates for the refinancing to make sense financially when we're looking at the 3% present value savings, which is typically the metric we look at to see if the refunding makes sense. And the last item I know we've discussed before is really, the timing, the discussion on the financing for the project as a whole. Really comes down to comparing the level of bond versus cash financing to the overall type of project that's being financed, the availability of city funds for this project and other funds, bonding authority, and then future capital needs. Maybe I will pause there and see if there's any questions on the various scenarios. Also see looking here at the, sorry, David, at the comparison of levy to the capital project needs for this project and future ones.
Thanks, Mikhail. So I'll just add, Council, I think the other question you had for me, which I put in, and I have it on the screen right now, and it was in my memo, was looking at what's the city's currently financing. So in the chart you see in the memo I have on the screen, this is kind of what I was talking about in the budget. So we identified $702,000 of existing levy dollars. Again, that was that 572 we've talked about, plus another 130 of former capital that was in the budget for capital purchases this year. So with that, based off of the previous discussions that have been had, we plugged in we took $280,000. That would be, again, as Michaela just said, the max, the top end if you bonded 100%. And then no capital funds. Also subtracted $270,000 that we've discussed as the essentially annual levy to help fund the equipment CIP. That's also assuming, again, $1 million in cash designated from our current capital funds for the CIP. And then the $152,000, the last bit for road improvements, also with $150,000 in capital projects. So with those three things, if funded in this manner, we would exhaust the existing levy dollars, as well as use $1.15 million in existing capital funds. So existing levy dollars would be expended, and we'd have an estimated $3.8 million in capital funds left over for any future projects. So that's where we would be at on the financing end. Obviously, if you adjust, say, City Hall, if you do option 2 or option 3, as was presented, these numbers adjust slightly. You might end up with some extra levy dollars to be used for a future project or used to decrease the levy, but fewer capital funds. So with that, I guess we will, discussion from the council. Any further questions for myself or for Michaela on the options? And then obviously what we're looking for is further direction if you want to start proceeding with bonding now, yet this year, or if you would like to wait until 2025. Again, you did adopt that reimbursement resolution at your last meeting, which gives you 18 months to do any bonding on this project that you would choose.
I have a question, David. This is regarding the question I had for you as far as maturity dates on investments. And also, thanks for explaining the 130,000. I mean, I was kind of wondering where you plucked that number from, and it makes sense. But you had stated that by the end of 2024, $808,162.61 will be matured. Then there's 472,000 and change by 2025, $773,439.15 2026, and $460,073.25 2027. So you had said that by the beginning of 2025, there's roughly 5.9 million that's unencumbered.
Correct.
So with that is just in the funds, but what, tax dollars or what other funds do we have? Is that 5.9 million everything currently?
Well, it doesn't include, I would say, our operating funds. I don't think you want to be,
No,
yeah,
okay.
so
So,
this
but
is-
that's the number,
yeah,
that's the number we have,
correct,
okay, by the start of 2025 is 5.9 million.
correct.
Okay,
That's just sitting in money markets that you can pull at any point.
okay.
And the remaining roughly 2.5 million, as you just said, yeah, would mature over the next 4 years.
So question on the summary of funding scenarios, looking at, I think what is page 122 of the packet. If we're looking at scenarios with a city hall cost of 2.9 million and the fire truck of, what is it, 1.4?
Correct.
Why, in my mind, as I think about the par amount, is it not reflecting more of what would be like 4.3 million?
I think the intention there was because with the fire truck, that amount is being reimbursed by that 132,000 is being reimbursed by the Pico Lakes Fire District. Would that be correct, Michaela?
Yeah, that is correct. What I wanted to illustrate in this chart is just, it's focusing on just the financing for the City Hall project of that deposit to construction fund of 2.95 million. So the par amount, the cash, the total sources, total uses for each of the three options is strictly for the City Hall financing. But just if anyone wanted to see illustration of what the debt service would be when factoring the fire truck, that's where the 132,000 per year has been incorporated. But you're right, in all three scenarios, we're assuming there's no change to the fire truck or to the equipment certs financing. But in each of these, the financing for that fire truck would increase the par amount, by roughly 1.5 million. So to answer your question, we would be looking at total sources for both projects of about 4.5 million. And then, but that would stay the same in all three scenarios.
And we did, and those are, the full bond runs are included below this. So if you look at the 2.5 to 2, you'll see the full par amount, like 4.02, 3.515, or 4.475. Skip the first one. So the full bond runs are also still provided. This is just the summary.
Correct.
And so we can bond now for the fire truck to get that reimbursed, correct?
Correct.
correct.
As the thing that Michaela spoke last time, with that being more of an equipment bond, it's a much simpler process to go through that and get that done than the CIP bond for City Hall that has a longer process.
I think I would side a lot more with what Mayor Lillehei had said. I think that I would be in favor of moving forward with the bond for the fire truck to get reimbursed, but then to not make any decisions yet on the City Hall. As far as bonding, I think we have 18 months to do that. I think that, I don't know if that's a decision that we have to make now, but I think I would be in favor more of paying cash for this type of expense. I think bonding traditionally has been used in more things like roads than we would see in City Hall. So I just think that at this time, I don't feel comfortable making any decisions about bonding for City Hall, since we do have the cash, and within the next 18 months, we could decide if that should change. So that's where I stand on it as of right now.
One of the things that I was looking at was if we bond now versus March, the difference is minuscule compared to, well, non-existent essentially from what you've ran, correct, Michaela?
Yeah, that is correct. And of course, you continue to monitor where we think rates are going to be, at that time. But we're not showing a very different variation between now and waiting until March.
And does the city run a risk rating?
Well, your risk is, again, we don't know what rates are gonna do.
Right.
That's the risk.
Yep.
And I know there's a discussion of, the Fed's looking to start lowering rates here soon, maybe even this month. A discussion Michaela and I had though is what the Fed does to their basis point doesn't necessarily always have an immediate impact to the bond market. Correct, Michaela? It's just, they're not necessarily tied at the hip. So the Fed might start lowering it, but that doesn't mean the bond market's necessarily going to lower in parallel with what the Fed chooses to do. If that makes sense.
Yep. And if we move forward with the fire truck tonight, for example, we're not excluding our cause that we have the 18-month. We still can
not for
exercise
City
that.
Hall. No, that was a separate, you did the reimbursement resolution for the fire truck back in January. So that's separate. That does not affect City Hall at all. I know one thing you discussed at your last meeting is, obviously, we're going to be talking about Bushman in the spring too. If you wanted to, potentially opportunity to, again, if you're looking to do a package deal to, again, save some costs, you could package those two things together. At that point, you could choose not to. Again, there'll be opportunities to come back and reevaluate as we move forward with, for example, the Bushman Road project as well.
Anybody else?
I mean, first of all, David did an excellent job on the bonding memo. I still struggle with the same thing as I did when we had the vote. I think the cost is too high. We know we've got the city's CIP. We have the streets coming up, and we know we don't have a hard number, but streets cost a lot. And then Bushman. By paying cash, it does free up $280,000 for future bonding, but it also puts our cash levels, in my opinion, lower than I'm comfortable with. To be perfectly honest, I would rather, and I asked Administrator Chansky this question, City Hall can be stopped. He said, I said, can this be stopped? Then the reason I asked the question, what we have now is not adequate for staff. I mean, that's a given. And I think the cost is too high. I mean, if you bonded $3 million, that's a $4 million project. Right? I mean, the interest. So to me, I mean, this memo on bonding was very comprehensive and it addressed other things that we have. But either way, you pay cash. In my opinion, the level that our capital fund will be at is too low. And, but on the positive side, you do have the ability. How much can you bond for $280,000?
Michaela, do you want to take $280,000 is the $3,030,000.
Okay.
In this scenario.
Okay, so it's the full amount.
It's the no cash, no cash contribution option.
Yep, okay. Alrighty,
And that's the far right column showing that, the average 105% over levy amount that you see.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
And to council members, I just brought this up to Councilmember Jensen's comment. Yeah, what your full amount would be. You'd be bonding 280 gets you the $3,030,000 because then that covers all the costs to do the bonding, and then on that far right side, that's the at the end of 15 years what you'd end up paying. So, just what Councilmember Jensen was referring to.
I don't know, maybe waiting till March makes sense so we have some other things to look at that time, like maybe Bushman will move forward potentially, and then that can be considered along with this. I do have concerns, like Councilman Jensen said, about, utilizing too much cash just to pay for this project alone. just based on all the other projects we've talked about, using like $1 million for this, for the equipment CIP. And obviously, you know, Bushman is gonna be expensive and then the road improvements as well. So, based on the fact that it doesn't appear there'd be much of a change between now and March, I'm fine with waiting. Hope the rates maybe improve in that time, and we can reevaluate it maybe better with some other bigger projects as far as how those funds are allocated, but.
I like the half better. I mean, the interest, obviously, when we bond for half is, you know, not as bad as $1 million, but.
When we were, you know, kind of encouraged to wait and see what the election does, you know, that could change the rates too, one way or the other. So it's a gamble, but seeing the preliminary numbers coming in that, you know, it's roughly the same, I'd feel good about moving forward with the fire truck reimbursement to do that. Again, if we did that in January, that was probably a January resolution, so it's getting up to a year, coming up soon. And it might also just clarify a little bit more on the easier books of that full bond is payment by the fire district. So it's easier for tracking of that entire bond is for the fire district. So I'd be fine with that. Unless anybody else has any discussion, I'd make a motion to, I'll do it separately. I'll make a motion to still discuss later, at a later time, for the bonding for City Hall.
When you say later time, I don't want to clarify. You want maybe just say like after?
After, to rediscuss in February.
Okay.
Question though that arises, okay, go forward, we,
Well, no, we have to have a second.
Oh, second.
Okay, second.
For
Yeah, sorry.
discussion.
that's just for the fire truck.
We're just talking fire truck, just to
Okay,
keep-
because on your second
Then
part
we'll-
about City Hall,
Well, this is just City Hall. I'm saying we'll rediscuss in February.
That was
for
his
bonding.
motion. Is that your second then?
Yeah.
Okay, and then do you want, are you talking fire truck?
And then I was gonna go on the fire truck, just to keep them two separate things.
well, my question is, ground gets broken, City Hall starts, it's under construction. What do you pay quarterly on this? I mean, do you pay in full at the end?
He'll invoice us. I think it says monthly, correct?
Okay.
It's a monthly process.
You've got
so-
cash monthly.
Yeah, so it's not a upfront, we cut a $2.95 million check to High Tech. It's as those monthly, High Tech will invoice the city for what costs have incurred that month.
Okay.
Just like any other project we do with engineering, WSB, any of that. So it's a monthly invoicing.
Just a clarification, because I've also seen some project 50% due upon, we're getting a head shake, it's monthly invoiced as work is performed.
Perfect. All right, any other discussion on holding off till February on City Hall?
Is February enough time? Just curious if we were trying to bond in March? Or, I mean,
So,
maybe it
well-
doesn't, maybe March is like an arbitrary time, I don't
Could
know.
push it back. if
I don't want to
you-
speak out of turn without
Yeah.
Mr. Sandy here. Probably January, February-ish, you're going to be talking about Bushman Road.
Okay.
Because at that point, I think the intention is to have the final design done, then go out to bid, have that bid, and then having that discussion about Bushman Road. So probably January, February-ish, maybe just after the beginning of the year, maybe you want to be more generic.
Flexible.
That's probably the time we would probably have that discussion again, is in correlation with Bushman Road.
Within that, can we also ask Michaela, just keeping an eye on the rates and letting us know if there's major movement?
She owns.
Yeah, yep, I'm here, sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say that, you know, I think we picked March as just a target, you know, just for estimation purposes, but certainly, you know, I think in response to the question on kind of the future timing, you know, proceeding with the fire truck financing now, and we'll have to update the schedule. You'll have an idea of what the rates are so you have the benchmark of the rates at that sale. And then from that point, we'll be able to make projections moving forward and then continually monitor, you know, what it comes back to the timing for the need for the financing, and that's part of the conversations you're having now, but, so you'll be able to have a better sense with the sale, and then we'll be able to, monitor moving forward, what works best in spring of 2025, along with the process for, that would need to be completed for the financing.
So, and essentially, just to sum up, I think, Michaela, the fire truck you can almost use as a litmus test.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Michaela, did you cover what the bank qualified rate is today?
Oh, sorry, I should clarify. So bank qualified is a term if it's less than 10 million in a calendar year, versus if you, and so, it's kind of it depends on the term of the financing, but if you're non-bank qualified, which is more than 10 million issued in calendar year, you see a slightly higher interest rate. So the debt structures that you have before you tonight assume that bank qualified, meaning you've issued less than 10 million. And so those are, the interest rates reflect that.
And again, Mike, you really have two motions there, fire truck bundled with.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I was going to make that as a second motion, just so it's clear.
So the current
So really, we're not continuing with anything more discussion with bonding for City Hall at this time, rediscussing it in February.
But you're going to put that with the fire.
I'm going to make a second motion for that.
I think they should be separate, but okay.
That's what
is
that's what he's doing.
I'm trying to do it separate.
So motion one is
Yeah,
just,
this is
it's City
just-
Hall.
I'm just saying, we're not doing anything with City Hall at this point.
All right.
That is my motion.
Yep. All right.
Does Ms.
Any
Ball
discussion?
still second that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just, I guess maybe I'm not going to second, but I'm going to ask that we just say after the first of the year. So it's just whenever maybe the numbers come in or, so it can be.
I amend my motion. We're not continuing bonding, we'll rediscuss at the beginning of the year.
Second.
All right. Any discussion?
So we're not discussing or moving forward with bonding on the fire truck?
This is City Hall.
This is just City Hall, I'll make a second motion after that.
Make another motion. All right.
That's why I asked.
All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. Now you're with your fire truck.
So now I'm making a motion to start the process for the bonding of the fire truck.
Second.
Any discussion on that?
Probably no more that I have to comment than what I've made known before. And I honestly feel like, whatever I say is to a point that the council just is going to continue to do the polar opposite. So, we heard from a former elected official tonight that less bonding is better. The council at the time moved forward purchasing the fire truck because we had the capital funds on hand to do that, and we serve as the fiduciary for the city of Pequot Lakes. Their payments to us on an annual basis would be the equivalent of, if we bond for this, what we're looking at for a bond payment, if I'm understanding things correctly. And I just don't understand the logic behind incurring indebtedness over a capital expenditure that the city has been taxing residents to put in the capital account to do this very thing. And that very thing is to pay cash for it and to steer ourselves clear of getting into indebtedness for capital equipment needs. I am totally opposed to it.
So out of curiosity, how would that be administered?
The bond.
Well, if if what you're saying, Brad, we pay for it, right? And so would Pequot Lakes just put in their X amount, just out of curiosity?
So I'll have to dig up the contract, but we had an agreement, and per the discussion at the time, the agreement did have that essentially the private financing option with a amortization schedule. I'd have to dig it up. I don't have it quickly. Give me just a second. I actually might be able to pull it up really quick here. If I our district. Nope, that's the joint powers agreement. This is what I want right here. There it is. I knew I had it. If the city chose not to, what we would then do is charge the district, so not the city of Pequot Lakes, the district, an annual payment of $165,232.88 per year. But obviously we would forego having that 1.4 million back in our account immediately. We'd get it over 10 years. And we get 1.6 million instead of the 1.4 with that interest rate. So, so you're going, foregoing having the 1.4 put back into our account instead of saying we want $165,000 a year for 10 years instead.
But see, that's to me where we're sort of paying this, let's take from Peter to pay Paul. We have been taxing residents year over year for future capital needs. So we have money in the capital fund to pay cash for very needs like a fire truck. And so on one hand, we're saying we've been knowingly overtaxing our residents so that we've got funds in the capital fund. And now when it comes right down to it, we're saying, you know what, we're not going to pay cash for it. That amount that we're actually taxing people for the capital, let's just sort of ignore that. We're actually going to incur indebtedness now. And we're going to bond for this. And in the process, we're going to incur how many tens of thousands of dollars in interest.
Well, if you go back to the beginning, when we made this decision, we basically discussed the fact that because we were the fiscal agent, we would bond for it. But the purchase of the ladder truck, because it was needed to go quickly, we had to have the cash to pay for it within, 2 months, I think. There was no time to bond. And I think really when we made the decision, it was, if we want this truck, it was a good price. It did save taxpayers dollars as far as like if we had purchased it not in the conditions that we purchased it. And when Pequot is the fiscal agent or however the contract will work, then they will then do the exact same thing that we've done. They will bond. So it definitely comes down to like why we made our decision and how it came down to us, and truly was the fact that we took over the fiscal agent for that year, but this was the best decision at the time to get the ladder truck for the price that we got it from. And yeah, I don't take back that decision.
And I honestly don't have a clue of what you just said.
We've talked about it many times, so.
But Brad, again, we paid cash for it. So the fire district would, reimburse, which would be Pequot's contribution, correct?
Yes.
So that you're not for?
I am for the approach that we've taken. We knowingly moved forward and paid cash for it. And the fire district is going to make their contribution towards the fact that we paid cash for that fire truck. We had the money set aside. We were including it in the tax levy and what we're getting from taxpayers over several years. It's not like the money's not there. It's not like continuing to move forward and having that as a cash outlay is going to put the city in financial dire straits. I think we start to move more in that direction when we start issuing bonds and, outpacing what we gain in interest on our investments and what we're going to be laying out through a debt service schedule. Not the least of which, we knowingly are sitting here today with the feds pretty much announcing that rates are going to continue to drop. So even in this scenario where the council wants to move forward and bond for it, why wouldn't you wait to see what rates are going to be doing here over the next few months?
Right. Any other discussion? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Carries.
Last thing, Madam Mayor, members of the council, I sent this out yesterday. I do apologize for that. It was an error on my part, meant to include it in the packet, and so it is now. You got that yesterday. We did get the final Gordian pricing for City Hall. Again, as you remember, the bid from High Tech was not to exceed $2.95 million. the final fixed price from Gordian after everything got plugged in was $2,946,721.06. And that is that, again, that not to exceed number, formally through the Gordian process as we had discussed.
Move on to staff reports.
On to, staff reports. I have nothing specific for you, Madam Mayor. I'll hand it over to Chief Sandell or Peter.
Okay, anybody else have anything then from council? No? All right, agenda forecast.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, we have three things. First, if you'd like to have a September workshop, again, focusing on that third week of September 16 to 20. Current topics that are being recommended would be discussion on camping on public property. That's actually something that came from the police department. You may be aware that we've had some issues with people camping. And though there was a recommendation, I know Sergeant Garcia brought it up, of maybe discussing an ordinance similar to that of the city of Brainerd just passed regarding camping on public property. Right now, our ordinance talks about in our zoning code about camping only allowed on improved lots, residential improved lots, but it doesn't have a sweeping, there is no camping here. So it's kind of a by subtraction, I guess, ruling by subtraction, saying, okay, it's only here, so therefore it must not be here and here. So that was a topic of recommendation for discussion. Also, I know, again, I shared to the council, Mr. Bushman, who was here earlier, talking about the concerns about the animals. That was another potential topic the council could discuss if you want to pursue that, what the implications would be. I know Chief Sandell and I've had a little bit of time. He just got back from his own vacation. So we haven't had a lot of time to discuss what those implications were. Talk with Mike O'Brien, our animal control officer, of what that might do to our contract. If anything would have to be amended with our contract, how that would work with Hart. So discussing kind of what maybe an animal at large ordinance might look like and the impacts of there as well. The other option, we're just continuing keeping on the forefront, kind of on the, is cannabis licensing. Again, we're still waiting for the state to really determine what they're doing. They haven't started issuing licenses just yet, at least none that would be here in Breezy Point. We still have the moratorium in place, so we're keeping an eye on that. So we will be bringing that before the council for discussion, probably in the next month or two, of how do you want to do the licensing, how many licenses do you want to issue, things like that. So we are keeping that on the forefront. So I guess our question is, would you like to have a workshop this month to discuss any of these things? And if so, what items would you like to discuss and when?
I definitely think the, cat ordinance or the feral cats should be on there, but I think we need to have the animal control officer there. Question for Chief Sandell, as far as more people camping, do you think this is a result of Brainerd's ordinance and it being enforced?
Potentially,
No, it's hard to.
well, and so some of the stuff we've dealt with lately are property owners that are camping on their properties, which it's prohibited because they have campers and other items. And Pete's been dealing with some of that currently. But Brainerd has issues. That ordinance is in place for a reason. If we don't do something, some of those issues could come to us.
Yeah, it's more homelessness based
Yeah, correct.
than anything, so.
That's what I figured, and that's why I asked. I think all three are worth discussion myself.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Fine with that.
Cats have been an issue for the 25 years I've been here, but they will cost you a lot to get rid of.
Well, and that's why, yeah.
Versus like, a cat that just got out or something. That's the other problem that is,
Well, the ordinance, they'd have to get licenses, have tags, do something to identify them.
that'll be really hard to enforce.
Well, the animal control officer will just run around and pick them up if they're stray.
Yeah.
So,
Which hence the cost. I mean, that's part of the discussion, obviously.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I mean, when in September are we?
I'd like to also see us take back up the conversation on the compost site. I believe in June when we were talking about it, there was some idea of having staff look into what might be some existing sites within the city that potentially could serve that function, or even looking at property that might just be outside of, but adjoining city limits that we could potentially consider acquiring for that use. I just think it would be a worthwhile and very needed conversation to circle back on.
How much time, though, would we be allocated? I mean, that's a lot of topics to cover in.
I don't think they'd probably each of one of them would be too lengthy, would be my guess. I know from the animal and the camping, I think the PD has some pretty good model ordinances from surrounding communities that they can speak to, and also what those communities have experienced doing them. So it's not reinventing the wheel.
Okay.
On those two items.
The 16th, the 20th, is that what what days is everybody? I can do Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're doing like 6 p.m. Is that what we did last time? I can't remember.
Monday's out. I could do Wednesday, Thursday.
Thursday's out for me.
One by one. 18th, does it the 18th
Yeah, the
work?
18th. Is it?
How it works for me.
All right, looks like the 18th.
How about you,
Yeah,
Brad?
I'm not available. I know the 16th would work, Monday. I was just gonna look here quick at the 20th.
Doesn't have to be that week either. Obviously, I think Steph would prefer some time to prepare. Next week, I think would be too soon, but if you wanted to push it to the week of the 23rd, you could.
That would be a much better week
I
for
can't do
me.
Thursday.
I can't do the 25th.
So the 20, I will say that when
25th's the Bushman Road.
Bushman Road open house is scheduled for the 25th. That was the next item on the,
So 23rd, 24th, or 26th?
Yeah, I can't do the 26th. I can do the 23rd and the 24th.
I can't do the 23rd. I can do the 24th.
Do the 24th?
Going once,
24th
Say.
works.
twice.
24th.
24th, Tuesday.
That's fine.
Well,
Yep.
Make a motion. Do we need a motion for that?
It's been your practice. So.
I'll make a motion to discuss the 4 topics that we talked about having on for Tuesday, September 24th at 6 p.m. at City Hall.
all right. Second?
Second.
All right. No discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, motion carries. All right. And now I'll go on to, what about the Bushman Road? Did we need to discuss?
Yeah, so Bushman Road, this is something Councilmember Jensen brought up at the last meeting, some clarification. Mr. Sandy couldn't be here tonight. This is East Gull Lake's regular meeting day, and so he's their city engineer, so he had to be there. But he did provide you kind of a memo update on Bushman Road, talked about the right-of-way process. And the open house. Also, he mentioned in the memo about the exhibits for each parcel that were coming. Got those today, so those are now in and up, so you can kind of review those. He said they tried to overlay like the GIS, but it got really messy and you couldn't understand it. So If you've got questions about it, I would say feel free to reach out to him. I can give you his contact information. Otherwise, this is essentially what they're going to be discussing and presenting at the open house. So this is an exhibit for each area, and so they'll be walking through this with the property owners. So on the 25th from 5 to 7, he actually just sent me today the postcard to proof. So the property owners that are they'll each get a postcard email invite. We'll also put it on our social media. The intention of the 25th is mostly to engage with them, people to have one-on-ones with them and talk about, here are the impacts. This is where the trees are. This is where the road limit is going, where the easement for the permanent easement is, where the construction or the temporary easement might be on your property, which trees are being recommended to be removed. They're going to have, that is the intention of that open house, is for those property owners to come in and be able to work through diligently with the team to talk about this. Their right-of-way staff has been meeting with many of the property owners. I think they've met with most of the property owners on site already. So they've already been engaging the property owners. So this is going to just further engaging this process. By the 25th, they hope to be, they intend to be at least 60% plans, but he stated by then they actually might actually be at 70 or 75% plans by the 25th as well. But at minimum 60%. So by then the road limit will be is fully identified. That's kind of what they're trying to do here. This will actually, between now and the 25th, become even more accurate. They're constantly updating this as they work through the engineering. So you'll see this is like 28 pages, and that's because it is every single parcel and what their impacts are.
And to what prompted me to ask was, once those stakes went up, some of the properties have the permanent and temporary easement quite far into their property.
Correct. So this is available for you to look at. I'll send you all Mr. Sandy's contact information. So if you'd like to have a conversation with him and have him walk it through, I know he's more than willing to do that with any member of the council or member of the public as well. But otherwise, that's the intent of the open house. Again, the immediate property owners on these parcels, they will get a mailer. They're going to be reached out to probably by phone and email as well by WSB staff to really make sure that they try to come in for that workshop. But it is open to all of the public, but we're trying to focus on the property owners. So that's a little update on Bushman Road. And then again, that is Wednesday, September 25 from 5 to 7 p.m. here at City Hall. That is not the only time they can meet, any of the property owners. If they want to still schedule one-on-ones, they've been doing that and they'll continue to do that with them. So the last item we have for you is regarding, again, the City Hall project and is regarding a groundbreaking ceremony if the council would like to hold one. Again, that would be this month. Andy, we talked about this a little bit last week of when you would want to hold that. Two options, easy options would be just to schedule it 30 minutes before your workshop. So I guess that would be on the 24th. You could do it or before or after the open house on the 25th. Those would be, if people are already going to be here, easy times to do that if the council would like to do a groundbreaking ceremony. And Andy and Lindsay would work with the city to kind of program that of what that would like. They've done those kind of things many times before.
Yeah, I think before the before the workshop would be the best, because then we would all potentially be available to come if we wanted to come. Anyone else?
And it's wouldn't necessarily be a requirement, so it's for who would wish to attend, and we would just notice that a quorum of the council may be present.
You good with that? Yeah?
Okay, then we'll plan on getting that out we'll work on a press release this week for the 25th at 5, or 24th, you said before the workshop, 24th at 5:30.
Okay. All right, that is all. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.